Radnor Township Board of Commissioners, please rise and we'll do the Pledge of Allegiance.
Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
First item on the agenda is approval of the minutes of the public meetings of January 4th.
Move they be approved. Second.
Well, there were two separate meetings, so let's do them one at a time. First was the organization meeting. All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? None. Second was the regular business meeting. All in favor?
Aye.
Okay. Executive sessions were held on 1/11. All commissioners were present. We talked about the manager search, and we also had an interview with our auditors that are currently reperforming the 2008 audit and the 2009 audits. We had an executive session on 1/25. Again, the discussions were the manager search. Commissioners Higgins, Fisher, Spengler, Nagel, and Curley were all present for that one. And tonight, all commissioners were present, and we discussed litigation having to do with the surcharge and business tax settlements. And we also discussed under personnel, manager search, and some issues with conditions of employment.
John, we also had a session on January 22nd at 4 p.m. on Friday. We were for the interview of the manager,
Oh,
which I forgot to mention.
yep. And for that, that's the one that was just 5 of us. Next item is a report from the Wayne Business Association. And we have a full agenda tonight, so I just beg everyone to be concise.
I'm Diane Jurley, volunteer president of the Wayne Business Association, and we'd like to welcome the new commissioners with us and thank the previous commissioners for being so supportive of the Wayne Business Association. There's a couple things that the Wayne Business Association does. Number one, our mission is to support the businesses in town and to bring more business into the town for our members. And the 3 biggest events that we host and support are the Radnor Fall Festival, the Christmas tree lighting ceremony, and the Santa Parade, and also the Mainline Jazz and Food Festival. And our sponsor for our most recent event is the Wayne Hotel, and it was the Wayne Hotel Old-Fashioned Christmas celebration. And with us is the general manager from the Wayne Hotel, David Brennan, to explain how that went.
Good evening. Just briefly, we were delighted to be a sponsor this year. We had the largest attendance for the tree lighting and the meeting with Santa. We incorporated a couple of new elements this year, including collecting dozens of toys for the U.S. Marine Corps Toys for Tots program. We hope to continue with the sponsorship this year for the 2010 event and expand the events.
Looking ahead in June, we have our next biggest event, which is the Mainline Jazz and Food Festival, and we have our chairperson with us this evening, Jen Baylor, and that's her apprentice, Juliana.
Future president of something, I'm sure. Good evening. Thank you, board members, and welcome also to new board members. Happy New Year. My name is Jennifer Baylor. I am the producer of the Land Rover Jazz and Food Festival, to be held on North Wayne Avenue between West and Lancaster. It is held, as always, the weekend before Father's Day. This year, it is Saturday, June 12th, 2010. The event will begin around 11 a.m. and continue into the evening with the headliner group starting around 8 o'clock and hopefully playing Under the Stars. Last year we had quite a bit of rain, so, oh yes, on a stage, everything is tented for sure. We look forward to partnering again with the Wayne Arts Center. They will be presenting the 2nd annual Wayne Arts Center Arts Festival. The artisans will be on the street throughout the day displaying their work up and down the street. The addition of the Wayne Arts Center was the perfect complement to our unique restaurants and musicians in the area. I respectfully request of the board to grant the ordinance needed to apply for our street closure permit. We look forward again working on this project with the WBA, especially Diane, especially Mike and Bridget Liebert. We would look forward to our generous sponsors returning, especially TAC at Land Rover, Wayne Reed at Wayne Jewelers, Joseph P. Melvin Company, Christopher Todd. And as always, it's a pleasure working with Larry Taltone and Lieutenant Antonini. We look forward to another great event. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Sure.
Thank you, gentlemen and lady. We look forward to doing business with all of you. And we have a lot of ideas coming up with our members. We have 3 openings at our board, so we're looking for members who would like to participate more and be more active with the community. And I also want to thank the staff at Radnor Township. They are fantastic. Anytime I call, they are right there to help us, and we just want to thank the commissioners for supporting us and as well the Radnor staff. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Next item on the agenda is a presentation by Franklin Maps.
Good evening. I'm David Amsterdam with Franklin Maps out of King of Prussia, Pennsylvania. Our company in the past has worked with Radnor Township. We've produced the official township map, I think, back in 2000 and then reprinted some in 2005. And I'm here tonight to make a presentation on something that we call a community map and guide. Our company has started about the last year and a half to make community maps and guides for different municipalities in the region. It's something that affords the township to have an up-to-date current map of their township and community information on the reverse side of the piece without having to incur any expense whatsoever. The project is supported entirely by local businesses that advertise around the map portion of the community map. I have some samples that I'd like to hand out and then take any questions that you might have in reference to the project. Even though there's no dollars that would exchange between the township and our company, it would be important for us to have support of the township when we go out and sell the product, and also cooperation just to make sure that the map is current and up to date, and that the information that we provide on the reverse side of the map is what the township would like to have represented to their residents.
What do you say to people about the township when you go out to sell it?
When we go out to solicit for advertisements...
Sorry, you need a mic.
Okay, I'll go back to the podium and answer the question.
Thank you.
What you have in front of you now is a sample that we just completed for West Goshen Township outside of Westchester. When we go and solicit the local businesses to support the project by sponsoring advertisements, we explain that we're working with the particular municipality to produce a community map and guide. It is something that we bear all the costs of to produce the map, to print the map and fold the map. We also incur all the costs to direct mail one of these guides to each of the households within the township. And in addition, we supply a quantity of map and guides to the township themselves, something that they can use either to make available to new residents or to distribute at township functions and the like. So when we go out to solicit the potential advertisers, we basically are talking to them about the distribution and how the maps are going to be distributed, how they'll get some value out of their advertisement.
David, what else is in the mailing that you send out to the residents? Just this?
Typically, it's just that. There are, in the case of West Goshen, for their particular map, we arranged it so that they were able to include this piece in their quarterly newsletter. So where you take a look at the back cover of this particular piece and there's an advertisement on it, that back panel would be dedicated to the mailing, to the addressing and the postage, typically. As I mentioned, there's no cost to the township or the taxpayers. It's funded entirely by the revenues that we get from the sales of the advertisement. But it is important that we have cooperation from the township. If you take a look at the back side of the piece, there's a lot of information, township histories or park information, maybe recycling information, important phone numbers and the like, and it's important that we have cooperation from the township in order to do a good job with such a project.
Okay, thank you. Any further questions? We'll discuss this with township staff and the Wayne Business Association, of course, and then we'll get back to you on it.
Thank you.
Thanks. Next item on the agenda is the EAC presentation of the greenhouse gas inventory report.
Good evening. My name is Brenda Gotanda, and I am chair of the Radnor Township Environmental Advisory Council, and I have with me my colleague Josh Hilbert, who is an EAC member. We're here tonight to present the results of the greenhouse gas emissions inventory that we prepared this past year. We have prepared a written report and provided that to the commissioners. This is a summary presentation in a PowerPoint form. We'd just like to walk you through it. Give you a little bit background for some of the commissioners that are new and may not be familiar with this project. Back in September of 2007, the Board of Commissioners of Radnor Township passed Resolution 2007-24, and in that resolution, they stated their intent to endorse the U.S. Mayor's Climate Protection Agreement, which calls upon cities and municipalities to join in establishing goals and strategies to reduce emissions of greenhouse gases. And the Board of Commissioners also at that time declared their intent to develop an action plan to limit Radnor's energy costs and to reduce greenhouse gas emissions, which often go hand in hand. The EAC was charged with completing this inventory of emissions and then proposing an action plan to make emission reduction targets and then implement actions to meet those targets. It also authorized our membership, Radnor's membership, in an organization called ICLEI, which is an acronym for International Council for Local Environmental Initiatives. And what that is a nonprofit that provides technical assistance for communities that are undertaking climate action planning. And so they provided to us software that we were able to use to enter data regarding our fuel use and then convert it into greenhouse gas emission estimates. In the ICLEI materials, they also set forth a project plan to help communities identify and reduce greenhouse gas emissions. I wanted to identify this process for you. It's called the ICLEI 5 milestone process, and it starts with townships preparing an inventory of their greenhouse gas emissions, then establishing emission reduction targets and developing an action plan for achieving the target, implementing the action plan, and then monitoring and reporting on progress. We have now completed step 1, which is the emissions inventory, and we will be moving on to steps 2 through 5, but we wanted to report into you at this time to tell you the results of the inventory. Important note up front is the scope of the inventory that we conducted was limited to municipal operations. We had to make a choice as to whether we were going to include the whole community, residences, commercial operations, or just the municipal operations, and we had decided that we would tackle municipal operations first, since the township itself would have greater control over making changes in emissions reduction and also a better data set. It would be easier for us to get energy data regarding township operations. So we looked at township property, We also worked with Leo Burnaby at the Radnor Township School District to incorporate that into the inventory, and then facilities that receive public funding or services from Radnor Township were included as well. And you can see on the slide that what was excluded were the residential sources and commercial sources. We also believed that because the Delaware Valley Regional Planning Commission, DVRPC, was undertaking at the same time a complementary inventory of residential, commercial, industrial, and transportation sources in the region, that we would be able to use that, and then together with the inventory that we conducted here, have a complete picture of greenhouse gas emissions. So the process involved collecting the data on electricity use, natural gas use, fuel, waste, that type of information, entering it into the ICLEI software, and then the software helped to calculate the greenhouse gas emissions, and we evaluated 5 categories of sources, which included the buildings, vehicles, public lighting, water, sewer, and waste. And importantly, we used 2005 as a baseline. You needed to start somewhere to pick a year. We thought we had a robust data set for 2005, and that was also the baseline year that's been used by DVRPC in their regional inventory, so it'll help to keep the two complementary. We are going to, I'm going to turn this over to Josh Hilbert to walk.
Was it an option to use a more recent year? I mean, I understand the merits of, keeping it against the benchmark, but.
We could have chosen any year that we wanted. When we undertook this, it was, the resolution was passed in 2007. We started in 2008, and it seemed as though 2005 would be a good place because we had the data. So you could choose any year you wanted. But as I said, I want to turn this over to my colleague, Josh Hilbert, who really was instrumental in pulling all of this together. This was a hugely collaborative effort. We relied on township staff, EAC members, community volunteers. At the time that Josh volunteered for this, he wasn't even on the EAC. He was an interested resident, and we were very fortunate to have his expertise. He has his own consulting firm and does this for a living. So unlike other townships who've had to hire consultants to do it, we were able to do it at no cost through a lot of hard work of community members, township staff, and others. Also, I wanted to note the participation that we had from Radnor Township School District, and also Villanova, who supplied us with an intern and a computer in which to do it. So we appreciate all of those efforts. And so let me turn it over to Josh so he can get into the substance for you. Thanks.
Thank you, Brenda. The first slide is a summary of the data that Brenda was describing. The chart on the left shows how many metric tons of carbon dioxide equivalent that the report has in its totals, and that represents almost 11,000 tons in 2005. You can see that buildings represent nearly 50% of our emissions, with vehicles next, and then followed by waste and public lights. You'll see on the right that in terms of cost, you'll see that waste is missing from that chart. 1.7 or almost $1.8 million are shown there. Waste is missing because in 2005 we did not pay to have our waste incinerated. It was we only paid for it to have it hauled. In our buildings, they're representing 49% of our total emissions, or a little over 5,000 tons of carbon dioxide, and $1.2 million. That's electricity, natural gas, and oil. You'll see in the next slide that Radnor Township School District accounts for 82% of those 5,200 tons. And the reason is the schools have much more square footage than the buildings that Radnor Township owns. And interesting, that last point there shows that from the Delaware Valley Regional Planning Commission report, we found out that the residential buildings in our township will total to be nearly 25 times more than our municipal emissions. So they'll be important to look at in the future. But for right now, you can see this chart shows what we've included in this report, with that Radnor School District electric bar there jumping up. In vehicles, they were about 21% of our total emissions, a little under $400,000 in gasoline and diesel. This is the fuel that we have in our fuel depot, the municipal fuel depot. So it included trash trucks at 22,000 gallons, marked police cars at almost 17,000 gallons, I have some interesting fuel efficiency data there for the data that we do have. On the next chart, you'll notice that the school buses in the school district, again, are one of the biggest users, with our utility vehicles in the Radnor Township second. Public lighting includes street lights, traffic signals, and our park lighting. It's a small component of our total emissions, but still $250,000 in electricity. In 2007, so after this baseline report covered, in 2007 we did convert our traffic signals from incandescent lighting to LED lighting, all except for our yellow lights, which, as you probably know, are on not very long compared to the red and the green lights. But the biggest component is street lights, of course, at almost $180,000. And it's a good opportunity to look at when we develop our goals and our action plan. Street lights will probably be a good opportunity to look at in terms of how we can save some tonnage of carbon dioxide. And this chart shows that street lights are the main component. Our waste is our second largest component of greenhouse gas emissions at 23% of our total. Most of our waste, or all of our waste, I should say, and this, by the way, includes our residential waste, so waste that is generated by our residents as well as the township operations. But it does not include the commercial waste because that's privately contracted. But that's incinerated at the Delaware County Solid Waste Authority. There were no tipping fees in 2005, but from what I understand, we should expect to pay nearly $250,000 in 2011 for those tipping fees because they started, I believe, last year or this year, and so that'll be a good opportunity for us to not only save carbon dioxide, but also save dollars. And I also threw into this slide, you'll see that the fuel emissions from our trash trucks and recycling trucks are pale in comparison to the emissions from the incineration. So why does this matter? Well, of course, greenhouse gas emissions have been shown by an intergovernmental panel on climate change to cause climate warming. And the Pennsylvania Climate Action Plan of 2009 shows that Pennsylvania actually emits 1% of the world's man-made greenhouse gases, which I found to be very interesting. Next steps in Radnor are to establish our emissions reduction targets, develop an action plan, implement the action plan, and monitor and report on our progress. That's where we are now. Thanks.
Thank you, Josh. Any questions?
Well, I think that's very extraordinary and interesting, and I thank you for all the work that you've put into that. I know that there's coming up a more detailed forum or discussion on this particular report and some of the offshoots of this report. Do you want to talk a little bit about that or announce it?
Can I ask two other questions before you do that, though, about the report? Quick ones. The incineration tons, is that adjusted for the power? Does the incineration provide power, or are we just incinerating it for disposal?
Yeah, that's a good question.
So if it provides power, you would need to adjust it.
Yeah, is it offset by the amount of electricity?
By the amount of electricity it produces. And then the other question is, what do you think would be reasonable to separate air conditioning out of electricity? Because it's probably a very high number and non-discretionary. You know, other electricity would be...
In our buildings?
Yes.
Yeah, and air conditioning and lighting would probably be the two biggest components of our building usage, but it would be a little bit harder to separate that out.
Separate air conditioning out?
Yeah, in that we don't have that separately metered. We have our lights are on at the same time as our air conditioners, so that might be tough. Answer to your first question is no, that does not take into account any emissions reductions due to the fact that you didn't have to burn fossil fuels to create that amount of electricity that was produced by the waste. That is a number that just shows how much carbon dioxide equivalent was emitted by that facility. But that certainly is a green technology, so to speak. You know, you're not burning a raw.
Well, and if we were going to use this report to generate policy, we wouldn't want to look at the incineration without considering the power component that it provides.
I agree.
Because there's a sizable amount of CO2 that would otherwise be not produced.
And to your point on air conditioning, even if we don't separately measure the air conditioning, when we move forward to do the action plan, we're going to evaluate steps that can be taken on a whole variety of levels to reduce energy costs, to reduce greenhouse gases. And, I don't know what times the air conditioning comes on in the township buildings or turns off, but all of that can be evaluated because sometimes you can make small changes and you can save big dollars, so we can look at all of that. Okay. And Elaine was referencing the sustainability series that the EAC has been co-sponsoring with the Radnor Conservancy and the Radnor League of Women Voters. We had a series of meetings last year, and we're continuing them this year. The next one is going to be on carbon footprinting, so how you can determine your own carbon footprint and steps that you can take to reduce greenhouse gases. And so we'll have a more comprehensive presentation on this at the next sustainability series, which will be coming up in a couple of months, and we'll post additional details on that on the township website.
I had sort of two questions. I guess they're combined. But for steps 2 and 3, who's going to be pulling that together, and what's the expected timeline?
The EAC will continue moving forward, unless you prefer differently, continue moving forward through the steps. And so we will continue to work with township staff and with any citizens that are interested in participating, and then come back to the Board of Commissioners with recommendations. But if any of the commissioners would like to participate in developing that, we'd be happy to have you join us.
Do you have a sense of when those would be available, or is it premature to know that?
I'm not sure when it's going to be available. We're going to have to get together and put together a schedule. Anything else?
I want to comment on the one of the parts of this report that jumps out at me is the fuel consumption and the fuel rates for our fleet. And I know when this board makes capital decisions on capital purchases, one of the largest pieces of that is for the police department. It's for the police vehicles. And I'm seeing, based on this report, I'm seeing that the marked police cars are averaging 9.4 miles per gallon. And this, to me, is low-hanging fruit. We're spending $50,000 a year on fuel at that rate. So I would hope that the target would be to double that rate, say, in 5 years, and the savings would pay for the vehicles. So you'd save about $25,000 a year by doubling that rate. And we would not only reduce CO2, but we'd also reduce our fuel consumption, our cut our costs, and probably reduce our capital costs.
Can I ask a question on that? Did you actually do the calculation of the miles on the car versus the fuel consumed, or was that done by the ICLEI software?
We did that calculation ourselves. The fueling station in Radnor has a card swipe system that the officer enters in the odometer reading when he fuels up. So that was able to spit out how many miles per gallon, essentially. I mean, it's a simple calculation, and then we brought it in to the presentation. It's not necessarily in the ICLEI software.
I assume those mileages are so low because of the type of service.
Yeah, it'd be a combination of the vehicle and the type of service. There's a lot of hard driving involved, and same with trash trucks. If you think about trash trucks, they probably get better than 3 miles a gallon if you're driving on a highway, but start and stop, it's tough on all vehicles.
Right. Next item on the agenda is the EAC request to join EPA Water Sense program. Who's going to talk about that? Brenda, you going to talk about that to us?
Happy to do that. I have to tell you, I'm not prepared with a presentation. I had inquired about that earlier today, and they said, no, don't worry about a presentation. The commissioners know all about it. They'll just ask you questions. But I'm happy to speak to it if you'd like. Give you a summary of it? Okay. The EAC is recommending that the township join the EPA Water Sense program as a promotional partner. EPA has this program set up. It's similar to Energy Star. You may be familiar with Energy Star, where they promote the labeling of energy efficient equipment. Similarly here, they are promoting water efficient equipment with a labeling program, and they have a website devoted to it. And what they're asking is all sorts of people to come and join as partners. With respect to municipalities, they're looking for municipalities to educate the public on water efficient products. And so we're recommending that we join as a promotional partner. It would include providing information to the public about the program. We can put it on our website. We have the green section of the website now. We can put it there. Make additional information available to the public. We have EAC members that are connected with the schools and happy to do programs there. And there is, in terms of obligations, there's no cost to join, but you have to do annual reporting to EPA, just telling them what you've done to get the word out, and the EAC is happy to take on that obligation. So that's it in a nutshell. We think it would be great for us. It'll demonstrate our continued leadership in environmental protection. It'll get the word out, certainly with regard to our emissions inventory and all of the things that we're doing to become more sustainable. It'll help us to carry the message back to the residents of the township.
Great, thank you.
Move the approval of the request.
Moved and seconded. Any comments?
I mean, I think we need to talk, I don't know, is there a downside to it? What could be, is there an obligation, a financial obligation that we're
I
going to
asked that question. We've researched it. There's really no downside. What you're committing to is to get the word out about it, and you can quit at any time. There's no obligation. There's no costs associated with it. The only real obligation is this annual reporting. So they have a checklist approach where it says, what did you do this year? And you can check off, we put it on our website, or, we sent out some brochures.
And we can count on the EAC to prepare that report for us?
Absolutely.
And then what's the upside for the township? What do we get for it?
Well, we will have benefits because they make toolkits available to us to help us get the word out to the township. There's collaboration with other townships and agencies on how to conserve water. Marple Township actually joined. I think they're the first township in Pennsylvania that joined as a promotional partner, and we've talked to them about it. They were able to secure, I think, like 100 free water restrictors from Home Depot to give out to township citizens just to kind of get the program going. So we don't see any downside and a lot of upside to the township.
Okay, we've had a motion made and seconded. Are there any further questions? Any public comment? Okay, all in favor?
Aye.
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 Thank you very much. Departmental reports is next.
Will accept, I'll move to accept the departmental reports.
Motion's made and seconded. Any comments?
There was a typo in the police section. Are these reports published? Are they on the back table as well? Do we know?
Yes.
There's an
Significant
incident.
typo.
Actually, I was going to ask AJ to just comment. There was the incident. There was a shooting incident a couple years ago, just next to my ward. Apparently, the suspect was apprehended recently, and he's going to be tried. But there's a typo in here. It makes it sound like the incident just happened. I just want to make sure that that's cleared up. Do you want to speak to that issue, to what happened?
Yes, sir. That was a couple years ago. This was why we put this in here, excuse me for the typo, but he was just sentenced, and I believe it was 35 years. He is approaching his 60s, so I'm assuming that he's going to spend the rest of his life in prison. He has had multiple convictions, and the officers did go down to testify in that sentencing.
Thank you.
Any further questions?
Yeah, can you explain the fatalities? On the second page, there's a list of just what were the circumstances around the pedestrian accident with injury, and then the two fatal accidents that we had in 2008. This was on the inside cover page.
If you want, I can get back with the two fatalities, the exact circumstances.
Thank you.
Yes.
I don't need exact just a general description of what causes an accident to involve fatalities in Radnor. Do you understand? I understand, but we have car accidents all the time. What made this accident elevate into one that included fatalities?
I'll look into that for you.
Thank you.
A quick question for Dan and Matt, I guess. As I review the reports, and we have the reports of permits that are issued for various things, I noticed that the prices are all over the place for the value of the work being done that's being permitted. Do we ever go back and check those prices, or is it just whatever the applicant tells us?
It's pretty much always been like that. I've seen some fuzzy numbers too. I've talked about it with Commissioner Fisher. Perhaps there's a schedule out there that we could review for both single or residential and commercial structures. But it's always been up to the honesty, if you will, of the applicant to list the initial cost of the permit.
Yeah, some seem pretty outrageous.
I agree with you.
Okay, thanks. Motion made and seconded. Any public comment? Well, no, of course not. All in favor?
Aye.
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 Any opposed? Okay. Committee reports. Do we have any committee reports?
Don, could we, there's one under Public Works, should appear first on the,
Yes.
on the committee. Could we do that one now? Resolution 2010-07 regarding Agnes Irwin. It's EE under Public Works. Can you do that one now?
Yes, do you want to do it?
Sure, I'll be happy to do it. We have before us the resolution, Agnes Irwin, to construct an addition, replacement of athletic and dining facilities of the middle school, middle upper school, construct additional parking and stormwater management facilities at 295 South Ethan Avenue. Dan, there's a number of items in the resolution. They've all been signed off that they're going to do those. We have a letter.
I have a signed letter agreeing to the 17 conditions.
All right. I'll move the approval of the resolution.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Hold on,
Oh,
hold on.
comment.
I don't even have
Yeah,
the document in front of me.
It's out of order, so you got to dig.
Yeah, I'm digging.
We're hoping to slip it by you, John.
Well, you can slip it by me. What about public comment and everything?
Yeah,
So-
we didn't do public comment. Elaine, you looked into this, didn't you?
Yeah, this is in my ward. I've spoken to a few neighbors about it. I've spoken to the applicants about it. In general, there seems to be support of this. It looks, they're making some improvements by increasing parking, which will take some of the traffic pressure off of the road when it's time to pick up and drop off, which is a big crowd pleaser. I have not had negative feedback from the community about this at all. I've also been told that they're looking into putting a green roof, which is would be a great asset to have more green roofs in this township, if that does come to fruition. And I've been encouraging that application. So.
Yeah, the Planning Commission recommends approval, and we discussed this at our last meeting. A presentation was made to us.
Any
And
further
this is
comments
the
or
preliminary
questions?
plan, so this
Yeah.
will come back to you as a final.
Any further comments or questions by the commissioners? Any public comment on this one? Okay, all in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Thanks, Bill. Okay, Don, community development.
The first item is the announcement of 2 vacancies on the Comprehensive Plan Implementation Committee. The second item is the announcement of the vacancy on the Open Space Committee. And the third item is a discussion of the Radnor Enhancement Community Trust. And Commissioner Fisher, can you summarize this for us? This is item C.
Yep.
Just to back
Well,
up
I
a
think this
second,
is
Don,
gonna
though,
be
I guess we usually say if people are interested in applying for the open positions, they should send an application to Bill Martin.
Very good.
Is that right, Bill? Okay.
That's correct. Thank you, Jim.
Okay. The Radnor Enhancement Community Trust is a separate entity that was put together a number of years ago. I wasn't around or paying attention when this was done. This was probably back in the, I guess in the 80s. And essentially, this trust, if you look at the strategy and their focus, it was to improve the streetscape along Lancaster Avenue from the Blue Route out towards and through Wayne. And this trust receives donations from the public. It receives donations from business. But it also receives donations from the township. And the reason I wanted to discuss this tonight is that I don't believe it is appropriate for revenues that come into the township in the form of parking fees to be diverted into a trust that not only is independently controlled from the township, but its expenditures are not voted on in public by this board. The projects that they embark on are not the decision of this board. And this trust began receiving funding from the township, as far as I can tell, in 2000. The founders of the trust were a number of individuals in the township, but most notably, the treasurer of the trust is David Bayshore, or was David Bayshore at the time. I've obtained the 990 tax filings for the trust, and I've compared their filings to some of the financial records that were presented to me from Bill Martin, and I'm having a difficult time reconciling the numbers between what was filed in their tax returns against the report that was put together by David Bayshore. And in the footnote of one of the financial reports that David Bayshore put together for the township, he claimed that he was actually doing the financial record keeping on the township side all the way up and through 2007, at which time Amy Cuthbertson took over that process. The reason I'm bringing this up is that we actually received a letter from a business owner in Wayne who was complaining about the parking fees going up and the direction that they were given to make payment of these parking fees. At one point, I guess, Bill, I'll have to have you chime in on a couple of these questions I'll have, but I believe the township sends bills to business owners in Wayne for the parking permits. Is that true? Is that a correct assumption?
That's correct. Mm-hmm.
Okay. And over the years, did we collect the fees?
The checks are actually made out at the Radnor Enhancement Community Trust. It's part of their zoning hearing board decision to allow those parking spaces. They get X amount of parking spaces allotted in the AT&T lot. The monies are remitted to, we collect the monies and then remit them to the trust.
So we collect the checks and then we just forward those checks to the trust?
It's a transfer, yes.
So we don't deposit any of those fees?
No, they don't go in. They wouldn't deposit.
But I guess I look at this and I scratch my head and I said, under what authority do we have to lobby a fee against a business and then redirect those fees directly to an external trust? It doesn't make any sense to me. Now, I don't know who cooked this idea up, but what I'd like to see is it end. I'd like those fees to come into the township's coffers, and I'd like to see the fees returned, if possible, back to the township. Because the township is enforcing a parking fee system, which I think is appropriate. However, the fees should be going into the township's coffers, not into some private entity's coffers, in this case, the Radnor Enhancement Community Trust. So I guess what I'd like this board to do is to give direction to Bill Martin to discontinue this practice of sending bills instructing business owners in Wayne to submit payments payable to the Radnor Enhancement Community Trust, and have those payments made directly to the township.
John, I would like to make a suggestion. I remember when this was all taking place and being set up, that it may be advantageous if we could get some of the original members, Clint Stunnenbeck, for example, and Steve Bagis and Mac McCoy, to meet with a small group of us and then report back to this board to better understand it before we...
Right. I guess these are two different... I'd like to hear their perspective on it. I don't have a problem with what they're trying to do. I think they've tried to do good things from their point of view. I don't think it's appropriate at any time for a township to be deferring or passing funds to an independent entity and allowing that entity to spend those funds as they see fit. Now, whether or not the Board of Commissioners at times voted on these expenditures over the years, I don't know that.
Right.
But it just doesn't seem right to me.
No, it has...
Look, I think, don't we essentially do that with the library, the senior center?
The studio.
We give them money and they decide how to spend it. I
Well,
don't
for
disagree
example,
with the
tonight on
merits
the
of your
bills
question.
payables, Radnor 21.
Yeah,
And-
I
yeah,
don't disagree with the merits of the
the money-
question.
And
but-
Kevin, the difference is we vote on that in public and we discuss that in public and it's in our budgets and it's well understood. But this is not in our budget.
I understand, but your point was that, your specific point was that we give, the public money goes to the Radnor Enhancement Community Trust and they spend it as they see fit. That's what
Yep.
to me, there's no difference. I don't disagree with the merits of what you're asking. I think we ought to have an update.
Yeah, we need to develop a record that
created
Part of
what
this
20
actually
years ago.
has come before the commissioners, what the zoning hearing board stated, and how the whole thing laid out.
Yeah, maybe Matt can chime in for a minute. I mean, part of the agreements for these businesses to be able to have the restaurants the money, how it was set up, why it goes to them rather than us, that we need to hear clarification on why that. But that is part of their zoning hearing board decision.
Yes.
And that money goes to the trust, and the purpose of the trust was to reinvest that money in the gateway, in the downtown, and that's how it was set up. Now, how the legal requirements of how they set up, I mean, that we don't know. Maybe Matt can chime in on how many businesses are affected. And
Well, there's probably, out of the 104 spaces up there, of the zoning hearing boards probably allocated 45 spaces on their decisions. The rest have come to the township based on extra parking that's required. So some of it's been initiated policy decisions by the ZHB, but well over half has been volunteered by independent business owners to purchase these spaces, whether it's 5 or 10 each. And so it's kind of a mix of both. Not all of them are policy decisions by the ZHB.
Well, I mean, Mac McCoy has come and reported to this board on their activities. I think we should have him come here, make a presentation of what they've done over the last 2 years, how they've spent the money, and, you know, then we can ask him questions about it.
Well, I think we
And I
also
just
need
add
to
to the logic of
reconstruct.
why it was created, not just what they've done. I can't envision that there
Well,
wasn't some thought process behind it.
There was.
The process started out when we were doing the Brew Route to enhance, and we got large donations from Wyeth and Sun Oil, and, you know, of $100,000, and that was put in, and that was set up to start beautifying that corridor. And then Matt had a great interest, you know, the clock in Wayne and, you know, street lighting in Wayne, I think they paid for. So,
Well, one of the biggest projects was the park, which is at the corner of Route 30 and Sproul Road, where there used to be this horrendous gas station, and then there was a tire center.
Atomic Tire.
Yeah, Atomic
Tire. And that corner right now is beautifully landscaped, and we keep that up. But I know a lot of the money went into that particular project as well.
and then it was not only that, but I think in the early we gave them $50,000 each year, and they came and made a presentation. But they should come make a presentation, bring us up to date on their budget, you know, give us expenditures over the last 2 years, and discuss what it's all about, and then we can make a decision.
Well, and in the meantime, I think we need to reconstruct the record so that we can understand
Yeah.
what the commissioners have done, what they've approved, and we'll let
Yeah.
John Rice weigh in on it also.
Yeah, I want to clarify one thing, though. What I heard was that this was a zoning hearing board type thing. Essentially, we have a number of businesses in Wayne. In order to qualify for their use approval, they needed additional parking spaces. This AT&T lot is now hosting, as according to this report, 182 parking spaces. So it doesn't matter, you know, the point is these businesses rely on those parking spaces. But as far as I know, the township maintains meters also in that vicinity and/or collects fees from those meters, or we did
in
at
that
one
lot,
time.
there's no meters.
No
There's
meters.
no meters. But I thought there was some meter revenue at some point going into this.
No.
But again, this is not about the Radnor Enhancement Community Trust. This is about the fact that this township is levying a fee against business owners, and those business owners need those parking spaces to maintain their use approval under zoning, and yet those fees are not coming into our books. They are not being shown in our budget. If what's happening was presented tonight, at no point are those fees being accounted for. So there's no public transparency on this issue at all. Okay, you can talk about it in public meetings, but when the money flows, it has to be recorded. It has to be shown on the books as a revenue, and then if it is distributed to the trust, it has to be shown as an expense. That is not what I can tell has happened. And my biggest concern is that I look at this spreadsheet that David Bayshore had created, and I look at the dollar amounts on there, and they're a little bit lower than the tax filings. So there's money missing. And I'm concerned, based obviously with what we're looking at with the former manager's behavior, I'm concerned with, did all the money get into their account, and did it get deposited, and why is there a difference between what is being shown to me on this spreadsheet that he had created and what's on the tax returns? So I think we need, like John has stated, that the president has stated, that we should look into this, get all the facts, but what I don't want to see happen is another payment or any other deposits being put into that trust until we find out the truth of all these issues. So apparently this happened last year. I wasn't aware of it because, again, it wasn't on the financial records. There was no way to know it was happening. So I don't want to see that happen this year. That money should stay put. If the checks come in, They should be held, but I don't think we, at the end of the day, I don't think we should be instructing business owners in Wayne to make their checks payable to some other entity. It makes no sense.
Well, that's why we need to get the facts, John, because in fact, the zoning hearing board may have directed them to pay monies
And the Board of
for
Com-
the establishment.
And the Board of Commissioners.
I don't think that's
Well, I don't
within
know.
the purview of the
That's fine.
zoning hearing
The
board.
Board of Commissioners have been very supportive of this program. We've
Yeah,
given
done a lot of good.
$50,000 contributions. If you look at the budget over the last 10 years, you'll see there a series of $50,000 contributions, and most of the money went for improvements in Wayne. So let's have Matt come and give us an accounting and tell them all the things we do, and then we can decide what we want to do.
Okay? John?
Are we in agreement that we're not going to transfer any more payments to the trust until we know that information?
I think that would be a mistake. We don't know whether there's a legal mechanism requiring that.
Yeah, I'll check with we don't make the transfer monthly, or it's usually quarterly or biannually, so let me talk to the person that handles it, and then.
But that wouldn't make sense. Bill, are you sitting there saying, you said we don't transfer money? You said, maybe I misunderstood you. You said we get checks and we forward them. So are we sitting on checks for 3 to 6
No,
months?
I mean, I have to talk to the person that handles this just came up recently from John's request. Amy handles the parking permit fees. I had to see how it's structured and how it's set up.
I don't want to put you on the spot, but Diane, you were raising your hand. Did you want to talk on this?
I just wanted to add some insight. We, the Wayne Business Association Board, meets with the Radnor Enhancement Trust representative on an annual basis. And they are very generous in having an open mind in for our suggestions on how to spend this money. And Steve DiOrio did show up for our January meeting and was very generous and gracious to us. So I agree. I mean, there's a lot of nebulous
There's
things going on here.
questions.
There are
We need
questions.
answers.
However, from our perspective, we do want to see the funds channeled back into the downtown Wayne area for beautification. We don't want them lost somewhere else in Never Never Land.
Right.
The Wayne Business Association was collecting the permit fees for the AT&T lot back in before 2000. And then in 2000, I think it was when Steve DiOrio was still president. Maybe Nelson had just taken over. But that was transferred to the township, and then that's when the trust was established. And so there are other people, there's a lot of factors involved.
Yeah.
So appreciate that.
Just to
Diane,
speak
can you
to
come
that
back for a
issue.
second? I just want to make sure I understood. I want to make sure I understood.
yes.
So you're saying prior to 2000, the fees went directly to the Wayne Business Association, did not come to the township?
Correct.
The trust was established, and the money started going to the trust?
Correct.
I think that's when the
No, that's not
AT&T
correct.
lot
The trust
came on.
was established in '85.
Yeah, we picked up
Way
the
back.
AT&T lot with the dollar lease around 2000.
Around 2000, yeah, because before it came to the Wayne Business Association, those were funds that we put towards our events and things like that.
Yeah, I have the
So-
lease in front of me. It was signed the 13th day of December, 1999. It was signed by Chris, is it McGill, manager of Township, Radnor Township? Who is
I don't know who
this?
that is.
No,
Who is, Bill, do you know who this is?
no. There's no Chris McGill. Who signed it?
Let's see. No, I'm sorry, that's AT&T. Looks like Clint Stonebeck.
Yeah, it's Clint
was-
Stonebeck.
President of the Board of Commissioners
Right.
signed a lease.
Right.
There's no signatory line for the manager of the township. There's no signatory line for the solicitor.
Right.
So,
John, I think we
you know-
all agree, and Bill's going to
Yeah.
find out for us immediately.
Well,
and it's the next
Bill,
scheduled
in the
payment.
spirit, or John, in the spirit of public disclosure here, I've been sitting on this for a few months now,
Right.
and I didn't get it on the agenda last year. I'd like to talk about it now. Again, so here's a case where the township entered into a lease with AT&T, right? So we're on the hook. We have all the legal responsibility of that parking lot. We probably have to cover it with insurance. Bill, do we have insurance on this property?
It says in the lease we do.
Okay, so $1 million of coverage on the property. And again, this is a case where, the intentions were good intentions, but the process was broken.
Right.
So I want to make sure that this process is cleaned up. And, I think to my disappointment last year, that we knew, Tom Masterson and I were dealing with a lot of issues at that time. This was just one more thing on the pile. But at the end of the day, what I didn't want to see is it to continue. We never got back to it, but we're getting back to it now.
Well, it's
But-
going to be on the next agenda.
Okay, great. But
Right,
I
Bill?
don't believe we need.
And in
to-
the meantime, Bill's going, we're not going to wait till the next meeting. Bill's
Okay.
going to find out for us the issue and get
Okay.
back to all the commissioners on it.
I think we should start doing like Bill M, Bill S,
We'll have to.
John F, John
John M,
N,
John
so we
R.
know, the public knows who we're talking about.
Yeah.
You know. Because actually, you're giving me all this instruction when
And
you
then we
say
have Bill H.
Yeah.
Yes.
Sarah Pilling from Garrett Hill. I've seen the organizational papers for the Radnor Enhancement Community Trust. I believe that's for all of Radnor Township, not just Wayne.
Well, that's another
And
question
that's a question
yeah.
I have, because there are other areas in the township that do exist and could use a little bit of help. But it seems there's the appearance that it only goes to Wayne. And
Absolutely.
it does not. It is not the Wayne Enhancement Community Trust, it's the Radnor Enhancement Community
Yeah, and
Trust.
where we first got involved in this was when Garrett Hill started cooking. Because I think, John, I'm the one that pulled you to
Cooking
the
in
nut.
Garrett Hill?
Yeah, there's
Of
cooking.
course.
Antonella's great cooking.
Well, yeah, and
But
the
yeah,
point
I mean,
is
these
that-
are all that, we need to get this whole thing out, clean it up, do it in the light of day, everybody understands, and then move on.
Because this is listed as a private foundation.
Yes,
It's not a public foundation.
Yes.
So there are issues of, if you read the IRS regs, of the percentage of their funds that they take in that must be spent every year. They're only allowed to hold a little bit. So I would really support having a complete, transparent, accountable discussion about this.
absolutely.
Because there are other areas, other than Garrett Hill, in the township that could use a little bit of help. Thank you.
Thanks. Okay, John?
Yep.
Thank you. Don?
The next item is the introduction of Rite Aid Proposed Ordinance 2010-15, amending the zoning ordinance to permit a drive-through in the Wayne Business District by special exception. And as I understand it, Commissioner Nagel, do you want, will we
No,
no
go ahead,
discussion,
just-
just move the
No,
introduction?
move the introduction.
Yeah, I move the introduction of ordinance 2010-15.
Second?
Moved and second. Any discussion at all from the commissioners?
Yes, this was a matter that's been up before us a number of occasions. I know Don Petrose is out in the audience, and he can comment on this. But basically, what precipitated this was the possibility of Rite Aid putting up a fairly large store on what is presently the Taco Bell and Blockbuster. They didn't want to come in unless they had the opportunity to put in a drive-through, which would be for prescription medications only. There was some question as to the impact on the WBOD, and we kicked around a number of ideas about whether it should be a conditional use application, which would come before the board, and we would basically approve it or disapprove it with conditions. And after kicking around some, the idea really kind of focused on making this a special exception, which would require the applicant who wanted to do this sort of thing in the WBOD to go before the zoning hearing board and establish whether or not they met the criteria or the conditions for that which are set forth in the ordinance. I was leaning towards a conditional use, but that puts a lot more work on our shoulders. I think the zoning hearing board's probably better equipped to do that by means of a special exception. So I would be supportive of this, and it is in the first ward. At least the particular project is, although the amendment to the ordinance would be WBOD-wide in terms of its applicability.
Thank you, Hank.
And I understand that this just sets us up for the process of the hearing. We'll have a hearing on this.
Yeah, if there's somebody here tonight that came just because this was on the agenda, we'll hear from them. Otherwise, this is merely an introduction. There'll be plenty of opportunity. Sure, come on.
So I want to ask a couple. This is not what I expected, and maybe because I didn't understand where we were headed with this. But from the discussion we had on this at the last meeting when we discussed it, I was under the impression that we were simply going to refer this applicant back to the zoning hearing board to seek a special exception. But here what I see is we're actually going to amend the code in addition to that.
Special exception is something which is in the code itself. It's not a variance. You would go to the zoning hearing board to get a variance, a use variance, for example, or a dimensional variance, if the ordinance didn't provide for it. Special exception is something different. It's already embedded in the ordinance, and you're entitled to that special exception if you meet certain conditions and criteria. I think at one point, Don's client was prepared to go before the zoning hearing board, and they essentially said, we don't think it's appropriate for us to hear this. You really should go back to the commissioners. And that resulted in a series of appearances by Mr. Petroza before the board, and they can't go before the zoning hearing board for a special exception unless and until we make the amendment to the WBOD ordinance, essentially.
So if the other option is variance, if the applicant can seek a variance, what is the benefit, what is the advantage here of us doing it this way versus them seeking a variance?
You won't
just
get,
at zoning hearing
they can't
board?
get a variance. They have to have a hardship to get a variance, so it's very difficult to prove hardship. There's no hardship there, John.
Okay.
The use,
And
use variance is very difficult to secure.
And it's also my impression that if we set up a special exception for this very specific particular use, we have a bit more control of exactly how this use would play out and the only way it could play out. So we have put into this conditions that really put in parameters of the only time that this special exception could ever happen. Whereas I think you lose a little bit of that control with a variance.
So I have a question for John Rice. This is starting to sound like, to me, that this is creating a unique opportunity for one applicant, or one type of an applicant.
You know,
And
that's really the reason why I was opposed to it initially, John. But the more I thought about it, it's so prescribed and so limited to a drive-through for prescription medications only that the likelihood that you're going to have anybody else come in and do this is probably pretty minimal. And does it create something for one particular applicant? Yeah, you could look at it that way, but it also creates the opportunity for people in the community who need to be in their car and just pick something up rather than park it, go inside. If they're sick, if they have a sick child, I think Kevin made that point
Or if
during
they're
the last
handicapped
discussion.
and
or
they have to park at a handicapped spot.
And after thinking about it long and hard, I thought this was probably the appropriate way to go to be a benefit to the community.
Yeah, I have an issue with some of the language then. In section 1, second paragraph, it says existing drive-throughs, I'm sorry, no other drive-through or drive-in shall be permitted within the WBOD. This sounds like exclusivity to me. Where, you know, if we're going to allow one, I like the idea that
No,
we're...
they're talking about drive-throughs for other types of establishments.
But if I read it, it says that no other drive-through or drive-in shall be permitted within WBOD.
Well, I think the language should be amended to reflect no other drive-throughs for other types of business establishments, because that's the intent, I think, isn't it, John?
Yeah, the intent, and Don's here, he can address that, but my understanding, and maybe that needs to be clarified, John, that the only drive-throughs you're looking at, and would amend the zoning ordinance, would be for drive-throughs that would dispense prescription medicine. So not fast food drive-throughs, not Dairy Queen drive-throughs, not any other kind of drive-throughs.
It could say no other type of drive-through or drive-in shall be permitted.
That would be better.
And in point of fact, what we have there right now is a Taco Bell, which has a drive-through for fast food. And if I had my druthers, I'd rather have a prescription drive-through than a fast food drive-through.
But it would apply in the whole WBOD. So theoretically, I don't think anyone's done an analysis of all the properties. Theoretically, another pharmacy could come in at some point down the road, but that would be the only other type of drive-through.
Yeah, I'll move that we make that one amendment.
Second. Okay, public comment?
Good evening, Baron Gemmer, South Wayne.
Mr. Mahoney was gracious enough to give the history behind this, talking about the special exception which was suggested at the tabling of the by right amendment that came up earlier. What I'd like to talk about, and what I'm going to ask you not to introduce this ordinance tonight, is because of the process that took place and some of the comments that you commissioners yourselves have made during the Garrett Hill and West Wayne / C1A process. This was not a public process to create this original document. It was totally done in private by a single landowner for his hopefully soon profit and sole profit. It was not a public process, even like we did with C1A and West Wayne, where we had implementation committee, 3 public meetings, and then we were, because we didn't have any property owners, even though they'd been involved in the process along, were refused to be introduced for ours. And the same comment was made, Kevin, you made it on Garrett Hill about making sure it was a fair and equitable process leading up to that point about the inappropriateness of the majority rule in spite of the property owners. And here you have the rule of one, a single property owner who's doing this for his sole benefit. So I think the process has been flawed to get to this point, not that it can't go back and be done correctly so that this could be brought forward, but the process is flawed, which is why I'm asking you not to introduce it. And furthermore, you talk about the language and what properties would be applicable for this, and I'll put this on the, I don't know if the overhead's working, but
It's working. Just have to give the guy in the back a chance to get it up. Ready. There you go. That's enough. There you go.
Okay. The ordinance, the way it's written, and you can obviously tell that it was written, again, and I object to it being specifically for this Rite Aid, because again, any zoning ordinance should be a zoning ordinance not dependent on a particular plan. But if you look, it's very interesting if you look at the provisions here, where one of the provisions being that it needs to be only on Lancaster and also has to have a street abutting it other than Lancaster. And so that's all these properties, these shaded ones with the stripes through them, as well as these light blue ones. And if you take out properties that aren't going to be small enough to have drive-throughs or egresses on other streets, as well as the 2 churches, the AT&T lot, because we know we need that for parking for the restaurants on North Wayne, as well as the Wayne Hotel, it basically leaves the parcels in question and 3 other parcels, the Wawa, Anthropology, and the apartments and commercial buildings across from Wawa. This even smacks more of spot zoning than the by right plan did, which was across the board. So this is out of 200 properties. There's basically 4, the combined one and the other 3, that this right now would be applicable to. And that's why I'm telling you, I think the process to even get here was flawed. So that's why I would say that it needs to start over and not be introduced.
Well, I think we've had a very public process. This isn't the first evening we've discussed this. I think we've discussed this, and you've been up numerous times.
This is the first evening for this ordinance, this amendment.
This ordinance, but this subject has been discussed, and
we discussed C1A for 3 public meetings, yet that didn't want to be introduced either. So, I mean, it seems to me that we're applying standards in different ways.
As far as I'm concerned, it's been a very public process, because I've discussed it and had discussions with the public on numerous about whether we should have a drive-through through this.
Did you discuss the conditions that were put into the special exception? Because that's part of the public process.
You know, I understand that, and it certainly limits it to what you wanted to do and what we're trying to accomplish also. What we're trying to accomplish is we have a drive-through there, we have a Blockbuster that's for lease, and we're...
Again, I'll object to the use of the specific development. It should be irrelevant to whether the zoning should be passed or not. You can say, you can talk about it.
Zoning is great because, you know, to try and accomplish what the commissioners in support of the public want to do, we have overlay districts. There's a lot of things you can do to accomplish what you want to do.
And I'm not saying any of those are wrong. I'm talking about the process.
Okay. Well, the process is we're going to introduce this ordinance and have public comment, have the planning commission review this ordinance, and that's a very public process.
And Kevin, I'll turn to you because you were the one that made a lot of these comments in Garrett Hill C1A.
There's a fundamental difference between my comments in Garrett Hill and here. My issue with the Garrett Hill process and my issue with the C1A process is non-affected property owners went in and said to property owners, this is what's going to happen to you. This is, if you narrow it down to the example you're using, this is a single property owner who says, I want this to happen to my property.
And what about the other affected
Well,
property owners? Because drive-throughs affect the neighbors both positively and negatively.
I
so-
understand, but try to use what my disagreement over Garrett Hill was and my disagreement over West Wayne was that you're mixing apples.
No, I don't believe so.
And something not even a fruit, in my opinion.
No, I disagree. You basically have one property.
Can I just point something out to you, Baron?
Excuse me.
You're disagreeing with me over my opinion. That's illogical.
Baron, excuse me. We heard your point.
Actually, I have a question for Baron.
All right.
Because
I was gonna say-
Baron, I look to you sometimes for advice because you're well-read, you know our code quite well, and you have a different opinion than others, even professionals, and I appreciate that. One of the issues I have here is kind of reflects to what Baron just said, is that this zoning ordinance is all about one applicant. That's not good planning. I'm sorry. You know, I sat through 2 years of planning for Garrett Hill, and at no point did we consider one specific property owner's wishes. We considered all of them, okay? The process was in the public. The meetings were open. People could come and voice their opinions. All the property owners were welcome to come and talk about their wishes, and they were recorded and listened to. But this case, this board is, you know, I think one of my issues here is we have a zoning process under municipal planning code that allows for variance. But the trick with variance is it requires, thanks Bill, it requires hardship. Well, there is no hardship here. If this board wants to give zoning, if we want to look at the zoning in Wayne, and we want to zone for some improvement, for some change in the lifestyle, some change that we're looking for, we should look at it holistically, not when one applicant comes in and says, I want this. And I have a problem changing our zoning book for one applicant. You know, the way I look at this is if anyone else in this room wants me to change an ordinance or a law, they just come to me and they say, I want to change this law, I don't like it. I don't want to pay a parking fee. I don't want to pay a parking ticket. You know, this just speaks to me of one person being able to come in here and get what they want, and just ignore the whole public process that the WBOD went through, the fact that people were able to speak, and there was some public opportunity during that process. Certainly here at the board level, we had hearing after hearing after hearing on that, and you know, I just think this gives unfair advantage. I really see it as antitrust issues cropping up from this, because
Commissioner Fisher, isn't this the beginning of the public process? In order to change an ordinance, don't we have to introduce it?
Well, that's great,
but is that not correct?
I disagree. Let me step in here because that's the whole point I'm trying to make with Kevin is we went through the public process with our public meetings, and we were having property owners attend those meetings, and then they would have the opportunity to attend the planning commission, which is what we wanted to do when we were having ours introduced. And so basically that's what he's saying is the only thing that's going to take place here. Affected property owners besides the applicant are going to have to attend the planning commission meetings.
We've been talking about this, at least in my recollection, since September.
This is different ordinance too. This is not a by right, it's a special exception, different wording. So
I know, but we've been discussing the concept.
I understand that. We've been discussing the concept of Garrett.
You know what? You know what? In the next 5 or 10 years, I'm going to be sitting here still, hopefully, and Garrett Hill's going to come in and say, you know, we said we wanted to keep that gas station, but we got this beautiful thing for that corner. It's absolutely amazing. The community just loves it. You know, we'd really like to do this. And it's just that one little piece there. I know we said something different, but we want to change it. And guess what? I'll help them change it.
And if they go through a community process to do it,
well, we're going through a community
I'm talking
process
about the process, not the
result. This is it. It's right here.
I'd like to comment here. Baron, I could not agree with you more that this board, the zoning board, we should never be making decisions, zoning decisions based on one particular property. That's just fundamentally not right. However, when we as a community, as a implementation committee, as a steering committee, come up with zoning ordinances, when this group passes zoning overlays and ordinances, they try to foresee everything. We try to get everything in there, but you cannot possibly include every particular single use that could possibly come up. And it does happen that as time progresses, small uses that you didn't think of come up. That when they come in front of you, you think through, you have a public process, you discuss, is this a use that our community needs and that will not contradict the uses and the welfare and what our original zoning was for? And you go through that public process of trying to decide that, and if the answer is yes, that's the whole point of having a special exception.
That's it. And I agree with most of your points.
Or is everything thought of ahead of time? No. Do things come up that want to be changed? Yes. Will it get vetted? Yes. But the point is, this document was not because we, the people, or someone came up and said this is missing. It was originally presented to the implementation committee by the applicant because they couldn't get it by zoning, and now they've created this document by themselves again to send up here. This was not a community or a board
Right.
process to create
And
this
if
document.
the public, or if we, or if someone says, you know, it's not a good use. It's not a use that's going to be good for our community. It's not, you know, it's not really going to help our seniors or our frail people. So forget it. Then then the process is working and it gets vetted out.
Well,
That's the way I see it. I mean, I think it's time to introduce it and have a debate on its merits. I want to have a debate on its merits, which isn't going to be tonight, right?
Right.
So I think we need to introduce it, set the process up, and have a public debate on its
Then
merits.
I suggest that you stop talking about the processes for the other areas because
Okay,
you're
now
just circumventing those.
stop, Mr. Gemmer, because you have an individual difference of opinion with a single commissioner.
No, I'm
So you
talking-
work that out, but.
No, that's not true.
Okay, what you said doesn't apply to the board. So, I mean, my opinion is that we should introduce it and then have a substantive debate in accordance with the process. that
Allow
we-
the process to
Yes.
work.
And that's precisely my point, that you're talking about processes prior to the introduction, and that's what you're missing.
Thank you, Barrett. Don, do you want to add anything, or
I just wanted to.
Don's next? You can sit in the first chair.
I think, as Commissioner Schaefer said, I mean, this is the way that ordinances get amended. Somebody drafts an ordinance, an ordinance is enacted, you can't think of everything. And in fact, if I'm not mistaken, I think that the chairman of the implementation committee, which was where this concept of the Wayne Business Overlay, the ordinance originated, indicated that they weren't thinking of pharmacy drive-throughs at the time, that they wanted to prohibit bank drive-throughs and fast food drive-throughs and those sorts of things. And this has been exactly the type of public process that it's supposed to be. We were here at a public hearing on October 26, 2009, and it was a public hearing on permitting the drive-through as a use by right. And it was at that public hearing that the Board of Commissioners, this board, voted to have the solicitor prepare an ordinance that would permit it by special exception rather than by right. And what started that, the reason for that, was the Delaware County Planning Commission said the use should be permitted, but it should be permitted by special exception rather than by right. And that's exactly what happened. An ordinance was drafted, and as Commissioner Curley indicated, this is the beginning of the public process. This is the way the public process begins. The ordinance gets introduced, it gets forwarded to the Planning Commission, it gets hashed out at the Planning Commission, it goes back to Delaware County Planning Commission, and ultimately a public hearing is held, just like we had on the by right, where and there was some support for the by right at that point, but the feeling was it made more sense to make it a conditional use. And that's exactly what's taken place. There's nothing at all wrong with this process. This is exactly the public process as it's supposed to be.
Thank you, Mr. Petrosi. Mr. Taylor.
Ken Taylor, I live on Willow Avenue, about 400 feet from the proposed Rite Aid site. I'm particularly concerned, I understand the genesis of how this ordinance was drafted. I do agree with Mr. Petrosa that, and don't blame the applicant for sort of taking action when the board decided, again, based upon the Delaware County Planning Commission's recommendation, to actually have the applicant go this route. And I'm sure there was a lot of cooperation and suggested language between the applicant and the solicitor for the product we got. I'm reminded of the fact that, and I'm bothered by the fact that the recommendation against drive-throughs in the Wayne Business Overlay District, while it might be true that no applicant at that time had brought up the idea of a drive-through specifically for dispensing prescription drugs, I don't think that changes all the other concerns that the crafters of the Wayne Business Overlay District zoning ordinance had in mind when it considered to the community, to the walkability of, especially of that district, the logistical problems that would surround drive-throughs. I don't think this board would be recommended, and again, I know we're going to introduce the ordinance and this is going to come up in the hearings and the public comment on the ordinance itself. I don't think this board should disregard all the good thought that went into the Wayne Business Overlay District zoning because this is a use that had not been contemplated by them. I don't want to backtrack and get to the point where we're opening it up to drive-throughs for other purposes. I think that runs contrary to the Wayne Business Overlay District zoning and the concept that generated it. But I object that this particular use, perhaps not contemplated at the time of that ordinance, that serves a particular business interest of this applicant, and by the analysis that Barron has shown you, by the wording of the recommended ordinance, would pretty much limit the utilization, even if it's by a competitor in the drugstore business, to 4 specific sites that could comply. In other words, if CVS wanted to have a drive-through, they'd have to obtain one of those 4 sites.
No, they're not in the district. They can put it
If
in
they
tomorrow.
wanted to,
They can put it in
they would
tomorrow.
have to obtain a lease or ownership of one of those 4 sites.
No,
It's
they
not
can do it.
accurate.
They
That's
can
what
do it
Bill's saying.
tomorrow.
They could put it in their current location.
They're not in the district. It stops at Aberdeen Avenue.
The 4 sites in Wayne Business Overlay District. I don't want the board to, and I have a little problem with the board, as it goes forward, granting an assist. There was testimony that you heard relative to the prior request that was before the board, that there was contrary testimony that we're not going to go forward with this project if you don't grant us this. Yet when talking about the number in a similar store, I think in media, that they were using for their example, that the number of prescriptions over an 8 or 10-hour period may have been only as many as 30 to 35 prescriptions filled through this drive-in. Again, I object to the board allowing itself to be used to specifically help this particular business, this particular drive-through use. I would suggest that this board had it right when it approved the Wayne Business Overlay District, so contiguous to all the areas that we talk about, pedestrian-friendly, public transportation access, to let this in the back door for this particular use. I don't think it's recommended to the board.
Excuse me. I'd like to call the vote, because the fact that we'll have ample opportunity to bring this up again, and I certainly encourage you to. Also, work it in with right across the street where the Acme is currently and what things could happen at that site. Even though it's not in the overlay district, the interplay between those 2 sites are very significant.
When Pennsylvania Avenue, the thing that never really came, the car park thing was coming in, there was always a discussion about how particular there's 3 different growth sites at that location, but we know that this applies to at least 3 other sites.
Right. Thank you. Okay, the motion's made and seconded. We're calling the motion. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? Opposed. Ayes have it. Go ahead, Don.
Next is the introduction of ordinances 2010-05 through 2010-14 for building code, fire code, mechanical code, plumbing code, electrical code, fuel gas code, international energy conservation, international existing building code, international residential code, and international property management code.
Move the introduction.
And a quick note to the public, because...
Wait for a second.
Well, I just want to note this so folks understand it. This is an introduction. That's why we're able to lump these all together. When we're actually dealing with these individual ordinances, they will be broken out and handled on each basis if there are comments or suggestions.
I think just a little bit of explanations in order for these, though.
Yeah, can Matt?
Yeah,
Matt Baumann, will you
address
summarize why you're proposing proposing these changes?
Every 3 years, the International Code Council revises and publishes their codes. Radnor Township is what's called an opt-in municipality. We have opted in since 2003 to adopt these codes. Every 3 years, once they meet over the summer and in the fall, then they adopt the codes, and we are required by March of the following year, the end of March, to adopt all of them.
Essentially, what it does is it permits us to avoid reinventing the wheel, so to speak, because these organizations create these code books which govern building, fire, electrical, et cetera. And so rather than our generating a very large, very expensive document. We simply adopt these by means of ordinance, and then our code officials have a base document off of which to work when they're doing construction inspections, electrical inspections, and such. So it's an easy way for us to adopt very first-class codes.
Matt, can I just ask a point of clarification?
Sure.
On, I think I know what the answer is, but I wanted to hear it from the expert. In 2010-06, for people who have chimeneas in their backyard or outdoor fireplaces, I guess that falls outside the definition of open burning?
Correct.
Okay.
Okay, we have a motion on the floor. Need a second?
Second.
Okay. Any further comments by commissioners? Public comment? Okay. All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? No? Okay. Next, we have finance and audit. Kevin, will you handle this for us?
I certainly will. The first item on the agenda is the Resolution 2010-10 pertaining to the Citizens Budget Advisory Committee charge. And I guess, John, you decided to put something together to provoke discussion. And I guess that's what we have before us.
Yes, what we have in front of us is really a discussion document. It's not an ordinance that we were going to be introducing. We knew that going in. But we wanted to give the commissioners and the public a chance to comment on where we're going with this and what the intent is.
Do you want to start with public comment first, or you want?
No, let's have commissioner comment first. Go ahead.
Okay, my opinion is that this document will not get us to the end. If the end is closing a budget deficit that's on the order of $2 million, I don't think this will do it. Generally, I think there's a combination of problems. One is most of these things should be done by staff. Second, there's a mismatch, meaning that we've said that there's expertise that we're using, but we don't need this. We don't necessarily know that that's the right kind of expertise. I think many of these things are unclear and vague, and that's not going to get us to the end. Work with staff to develop preliminary budget. That's not really going to assist us in closing the $2 million gap. And then also I think there's a concern about creating special insiders, that we want the process to be open and transparent. I think elements of this will do just the opposite. Elements of this will take us backwards. We'll create special insiders. We'll give them special status. We'll give them special access. And then they will speak with moral authority about particular things that we're going to do as a township. And they don't represent the people. They only represent that group, however big we make it. So I think that's problematic. I do have a handful of things that I think it can do and ways that it can assist us. So first, what I think we have to do is pick 4 target points: 500,000, $1 million, 1.5 million, and 2 million. We have to identify spending cuts that would get us that level of, or what we'd have to cut to get that level of spending cut. We'd have to identify additional ways to increase our revenue and the tax increase that would be necessary to balance the budget. The goal is a balanced budget for next year. And then last, we have to look at the impact of all of those 4 points on our fund balance. So what we'd end up with is a menu, and then we have to have a big, open, long, ugly, muddy debate about what are the merits of those individual points. So the first question that I have, and this document doesn't answer that for me, is how can the committee help us do that? I don't see this document giving me that information. And then I do have 2 ways that I think it can. One is that part of our budget process, we have to make a prediction of the quality of the budget, meaning we made predictions for last year. They did not come to fruition. We didn't know that. But part of the process, and I understand the background of the people on the list have the background to do this, they can make predictions about the quality of the revenue streams that come in, and then we will know whether we're too sensitive to particular variables. So that's one thing that we can do. And then the second is we have to we have to give some thought to the value of the fund balance. We're required by ordinance to get it to a certain number, but I see it as a cost-benefit analysis, that it's more beneficial to have the higher fund balance if you're doing more borrowing. So somebody has to project our borrowing out over the next decade and look at the impact that the fund balance has on our borrowing, essentially do a cost-benefit analysis, and then we will make a business decision about whether we want to have a fund balance at 12% or some value less than 12%. So in general, I want to know how the committee can help us close that gap. I don't see it in this document, and then I do have 2 specific recommendations or ways that I think they could.
Next. John?
Well, I appreciate Don's sentiments on this. I think what I'd like to do is just look at some of the wording, because there were some edits that I'd like to suggest. Item number 2, it said the initial goals of the CBFAC shall be as follows. A, to address the immediate short-term budget costs and township finances in order to make recommendations for the 2011 budget. I think that should read something to the effect, review operating revenue and expenses in order to make recommendations for the 2011 budget. So that would give them a specific charge to look at the operating revenue and expenses, and that would be a catch-all. That would catch Don's point of looking at, saving $500, $1 million, $1.5 million, and $2 million. If we want to add the language of giving targets, that's fine by me. Also, I think move D up and push C down. So move D up to read to identify revenue enhancement strategies and opportunities. So that, maybe the KISS method's better here. Maybe keep it simple and give them a broad approach, and then we can give them specific tasks, because I think some of the commissioners have recommended that we give them specific tasks. But I want to stress that if you read the preamble to the numbered items, the goal of this committee is to develop recommendations for the Board of Commissioners to improve financial position of the township in accordance. So they're not an independent rogue body. They're an advisory committee, just like any of the other advisory committees that this township has. And they would report through the Budget and Finance liaison, whoever that is. A lot of this other stuff that we have in here, try to identify very specific items. I think they should get involved. And while Don stated that a lot of these tasks look like tasks that staff should be doing, at the end of the day, we've had tremendous support from staff, and they do great work, but a lot of this interpretation has to come from the Board of Commissioners. And I would appreciate having this independent body be able to interpret some of this stuff and repackage it in a different way, different point of view, and present that to us. I certainly recommend that they're involved in the CAFR, the Comprehensive Annual Financial Report, and helping with generation of that report. That's a very expensive report to develop. It takes a lot of staff time, and I don't see it as this independent body taking work from the staff. I see staff as leaning on them to do some of this work. I think it would be an assistance role, not one of taking. I think, Bill Martin, you may want to speak to this, because apparently, when I did a look of neighboring townships, we're not the first ones to do this, and there are probably lessons to be learned from neighboring townships and how they implement these committees. I can agree with Don that this could get carried away and we could end up with a lot of headaches, but I see a lot of opportunity here too.
Yeah, from my perspective, Tredyffrin Township did this. They did it from a different perspective. I mean, it seems to me, as a board, you're looking at it more of a standing committee. It all depends on how you want to approach this. I mean, they did it as a one-year standalone group that analyzed in detail all the operations, made a significant report based on how they could address their structural deficit. That report was due at the end of the year. They've completed their work. They gave it to the board, and then now the board would have to act on their list of recommendations. It really is how you want this to run. I mean, if you want this to be a standing committee.
Did the committee disband after the first year?
Yes. It's your prerogative how you want this to work. I mean, it has a value of having these outsiders look at how the operations work and bring their expertise to it, but it depends how long you want them to operate. That's why you need to decide as a board what direction you want this to go. I mean, if it's a standing committee, then you really need to think about what you want them to do from year to year, as opposed to going into the specifics for the stuff that we have currently.
My sentiments are similar to Don's. I won't say they're exactly, because I think Don went a little bit too far. But I think the focus, starting off, would be rather narrow with very specific tasks, and see how the process works. The core element of what this township does is provide services to the residents. And we can analyze things to death, and you never get anywhere. So my concern is with it being so far-reaching, so widely defined, that we will spend hours and hours on analysis that doesn't lead to informed decision-making. And I would like to see it more narrow in scope with a few limited items. And my preference is focus on revenue items, but I'm not wed to that. But I am not comfortable with having this thing so open-ended that people can run around carte blanche and just, suck up tons of people's time on something non-productive. And quite frankly, I don't think the committee would want to do that. I think they want to be productive and make significant contributions. And I think you give them the opportunity by keeping it narrow at the beginning.
One of the things that we need to address and we haven't addressed is our capital. And I think that's one thing that we're not going to look, we keep talking about looking at that, but we're out of capital money for projects, so we ought to look at our capital.
Disagree that could be one of the narrow
the capital, to me, is a key component, enhancing revenues. I mean, we spent 10 years going to front yard collection of trash. We started to talk about cutting services. So, we can talk about cutting $500,000 or $1 million or $2 million, but I think it's going to be a tough road to make those cuts. But capital is the one thing that I would love to see in there, because that's of immediate importance to the commission. We have anybody looking at revenue and capital. They're the two things that are important to me.
As I read this draft resolution, the initial goals 2A, B, C, D pretty much encapsulate what I just heard Don saying. I mean, that really sets forth what you were looking for, and setting targets is fine. That's a great idea, to set targets within those parameters. I would add an E, Bill, I agree with you, and E would be asking this group to make recommendations regarding funding our capital requirements as well as our unfunded accumulated leave debts. I would, Section 3 to me is somewhat repetitive, just delineating certain ways that 2 can be enacted or acted upon. I would like to see this group, I hear your concerns, Don, about having this be just another group of insiders. I would like to see this group be charged with soliciting public input. And so it's not just their take. They would be, which I believe was one of the charges in the Tredyffrin, and they did hold some hearings and have workshops for the public, and they had a lot of participation. Finally, one thing I do not want to see in here is revisiting our fund balance policy or having this group get involved with that. I agree it's uncertain what borrowing will do in the future, and that is nothing is certain on that front. However, whether you're borrowing or not, you always want to be able to refinance when rates go down. And your credit rating, your Moody's rating, is always pertinent. So I believe our fund balance policy is very important, and we should not be making business decisions to shy away from that if we're not going to be borrowing on a new bond.
Can I just jump on that topic? The history of the fund balance policy was that it was actually derived from the Government Finance Officers Association's template, and the collective intelligence, collective wisdom, the best practices of the entire nation's municipal body in coming up with fund balance levels. So the 12% is really the standard, and it's been thought of in many different ways, and instead of trying to drive that number based on our circumstance, you set a number, you live with it, it drives good action, good policy all around. It changes behavior. That's really what it's all about. It's about changing behavior. So I don't mind if they look at it. I love to hear more information. If they want to look at it and give us recommendations, that's great, but at the end of the day, that may not be as important as some of these other things. What I would recommend is that while item 3, the specific duties, seems long and detailed, I think one of the things we were trying to get with that was to, in fact, in some ways, limit the purview of that committee. If there's something we don't want them to do, we should take it out. The point is, if we don't limit or set their specific duties, then they may show up at the Township building every minute and take too much staff time. So we may use some of these points to kind of set the guidelines for what involvement they have with staff. For instance, there's one in here that I may have put in, and after looking at it, I'm not so sure it's right. It says work with staff to develop the preliminary budget. I don't know if that's really what I want them to do. I think what I'd like to see them do is allow staff to develop a preliminary budget, maybe based on some of the recommendations prior to that. But at the end of the day, once that preliminary budget is put together, it's put in the public view anyway. The board gets it early. We get to discuss it in public, and there's certainly a big public forum around that. So maybe that would answer some of Don's concerns about having this subcommittee that maybe, is working, on something without the public's knowledge. So I would recommend that we try to introduce, this is a resolution, so we can actually vote and pass this tonight.
First off, let's start with, there is a complete and utter error in the second whereas clause. So this thing is not ready for introduction. This township does not have an earned income tax. I don't know, I guess you modeled it on something, but...
I think after Bill and I had worked on this and we sent this around, we realized that has to be, I mean, this was not to be a...
Right, that's what I mean, it's not
totally
ready.
clean. I have that already taken out of
I understand,
another draft.
but I mean, I'm reacting to John's comment of introducing this thing, because I don't think it's ready for introduction. I don't think it's anywhere near close to be ready for introduction.
I just have two observations. One is that when we met with the various candidates for the committee, the one thing that they all repeatedly said is, what are we supposed to do? Are you at a point where you can tell us what the task is going to be? So I think this is as John had indicated, this is a good speaking document, discussion document, but I really don't think it's ready for introduction. And in terms of narrowing the focus, which I agree with Don and Kevin on, if you look at item 3, A through M, that is so broad as to, it's not going to allow any focus whatsoever, and the committee could, spin its wheels and spend staff's time when staff could probably be doing something better. I think it's really important that we narrow the focus, much like Don and Kevin had said, so that at least out of the chute, these folks know exactly what it is they're supposed to do. And if you give them the specific target areas, I think they're going to shine. And that will serve as the basis for perhaps expanding that authority going forward. But I think you need to take a small step in the first year, and that is narrowing the focus. That's my opinion.
Before I open to the public, my concern with this whole thing all along has been that we're to the point that anything we do to reduce expenses now is going to ultimately result in reduced services. That's my opinion after looking at our current budget. And as such, I wanted to have the opportunity for as much of the public input as we could get. And this would give us another vehicle in a different format that those folks could then bring us what they gleaned from the public. And I saw some of that happen pretty nicely in Tredyffrin.
Yeah, I think one of the things you want to think about, I think you want to, with this group, my recommendation would be a appointed person to be the chair of that organization. So you have some sort of organizational leadership for it. And if you saw with the Tredyffrin, their BOG, as they call it, the Budget Advisory Work Group, they held public work sessions. And I think you want to have a targeted deadline for recommendations to come back to you. Mm-hmm. At least if you're looking specifically for 2011, I think you need to charge them with either targets or certain areas you want them to focus on immediately. And then you can always address, if you're going to make it a standing committee, what they will do from year to year to either benchmark those or make sure you're meeting those expectations. But I think if you leave it too open-ended, you may not get what you're looking for addressing the 2011 budget.
Right. I see we have at least one member of that committee here. Mr. Watson, do you want to make some comments?
I appreciate the board's time. I've been taking a lot of notes of the points that have been brought up by the various members. My thought process is also as a interested parent of the Radnor Township School District. I've been heavily involved in the budgeting for that as well. And what I've been doing, and just to give you some ideas, is seeking public input from my neighbors and so forth, and saying, what can we do with that budget? Because they have a $3 million budget gap that they need to close up. And taking the actual budget, line item by line item, through Excel spreadsheets, creating it so that it is a useful tool that the board members for the Radnor Township School District can look at and say, here, guys, here's general purchase materials, 1.6 million. What are these things? Breaking it down to that level of detail and be able to explain it, and then asking questions to the public members and saying, hey, what are these items? Travel, tuition reimbursements for some of the teachers, and just showing the details and then presenting it. I do like the idea of what you're saying, giving a very detailed charter, telling us what you are seeking, what you're looking for, so we have some form of direction. I personally, as a member of that committee, do not seek to try to abuse the staff's time. My goal is to get in there, try to get as much information as I can from the staff, and then take it, sit with the committee members, talk about it, talk to public parties that are interested, and try to get their input on it. But making it transparent, like you're saying, I agree wholeheartedly with that. And I do seek, guidance, ideas, thoughts from the boards, bringing back and having discussions saying, here, are we heading in the right direction? Are we getting you what you need? That's really the key to it, and that's my 2 cents on that.
Thank you. Yep. Any further members or any other public comment?
Hi, good evening, everyone. Diane Edbrill on Spruce Tree Road. I think that this document reflects a lot of time and thought that was put into it, and I really appreciate the effort of Commissioner Fisher in that regard. And while certainly it may not be the best piece of paper that can be created and resolved for the township to charge this important committee with, it's a heck of a start, and I think it's more than I've seen the other commissioners here do. So it frustrates me when I sort of have been watching from home or coming to these meetings for months now and seen, people going back and forth on this. If you don't like it, then fine, introduce it and then amend it. Maybe you guys can all decide that you're going to get back to John in the next 3 days with your comments so that they can be ready, to be circulated in advance of the next meeting, but to not introduce a document because it's not perfect, because it needs work. A document that's as important as what I think.
Can I just clarify one thing for you, Diane?
I'm sorry, Kevin, I didn't hear you because you were interrupting me. I think start moving forward on this. It's time already. And to Commissioner Curley, I hear what you're saying about your concern about spreading this out and creating this special group of insiders. Well, you know what? That's why this has to happen, is because we did have a special group of insiders who basically either failed to oversee or made some really bad decisions about township management leading up to the need for this document. And it really is important, because even if we don't end up saving $2 million through the work of this committee, it's going to create a sense of involvement, participation, and transparency that this township needs. And so I would urge you all to, if you've got a criticism, fine, but partner it with some constructive input so that we can move forward. And let's take the next step.
My point of clarification was that there were suggestions sent in by commissioners, none of which are reflected in here.
Well, I can't speak to that because I'm not a part of that, but...
And I just want to clarify that I didn't create the resolution, but I certainly created a draft of the content, not in resolution form. I think the commissioners did submit ideas And I think those ideas were synthesized by staff to create this document. What I would recommend.
That's not accurate.
Well, I don't know.
Because I can tell
what-
you none of my comments are incorporated here, and I know that Don sent suggestions with those specific items and those specific numbers, none of which are reflected in here.
Well,
I can't
since the
respond.
staff has given you a resolution, it's your power to change it after public discussion and a vote.
I mean, that's what I
So-
thought I was trying to do. I disagreed with what staff provided me, and I thought I provided a positive alternative. So you might disagree with what I provided, but there's nothing
I guess.
contrary to the spirit of what you're saying
Oh,
in that.
okay, well,
This is the
No,
new
in fact, this
government.
is what I wanted
Democracy-
to do.
Democracy in action with all its ugly warts.
It's messy,
This
isn't
Yeah,
it?
we're not doing
Yes.
it behind closed doors.
Can I
We're doing
make
it out
a-
here for you, and it's going to be
Can I make a
messy.
suggestion? Why don't we can just strike things right now. We can introduce something tonight. I agree with Kevin, the earned income tax, we can strike that, right? Well,
I'm gonna, that was my goal, was
Okay,
to just
and-
get somebody to
I make
start
a
Xing
motion
stuff
to
out
table
and
this and
writing
put
it
this on
in.
the agenda for the next meeting.
why don't
with
we
some
table
better
for another
focus.
year, because last year we didn't meet every month, and, this is getting
Commissioner
tiring.
Fisher, why don't we just direct staff, next meeting, come up with those 4 benchmarks of reductions and revenue increases, and then next meet, or maybe take a month to do it, 2 meetings, because I imagine it's very difficult to do, and then in 2 meetings, we have that debate. And it's a terrible, ugly, muddy debate about how do we cut $2 million out of the budget.
The,
Can I
The
vote? Can I
first-
get an answer to the question? I mean, why don't we proceed that way?
because some of us believe that it's more than just 4 benchmarks. So then we're back to square one. I mean, we should just have this discussion if we're going to have it.
I'm okay with putting these in now. I'm not opposed to your
Right.
suggestions. I actually think they're fine. And what I was going to recommend is that maybe for tonight, we just pass the resolution with section 1 and 2,
Right, that's what I was
leave
gonna
3
propose.
off, and then we'll come back to coming up with a specific charge of the committee, which doesn't necessarily have to be by resolution. We can do that just by communications.
Except-
We don't give specific, just so I can clear this, we don't give specific charges to the EAC, the public, the Parks Committee. These committees and boards and commissions work independently often, and we give them ideas, but often, I can't find any specific charges in the administrative code necessarily for these other boards and commissions, so
But they are. We refer things to the planning commission, we refer things
that's
to
the,
EAC.
that's the
EAC
point.
ordinance the EAC ordinance clearly
I-
tells them what they are required to do or authorized to do.
Okay, and that's, maybe just 1 and 2 would be sufficient. But, and more importantly, I think it's important for this board to give charges to this committee, specific charges from time to time. So as much as I'd like to have all this in here tonight, I think it's just important, I would like to see this committee to be able to meet. Not a month from now. We need it now. We're going, it's already the end of, it's the end of January. We have 11 months now. And I think time is really ticking quickly here. So-
I'd like to
Can I-
suggest that we do adopt 1 and 2, but incorporate in 2A, Don's targets, because I think we all agreed that those were good ideas, and add E to incorporate Bill and Kevin's concern about funding our capital requirements and our accumulated leave.
Well, I would like to, and, this can get shot down. I would like to make a motion to table it, give it back to staff, come back with a more focused approach that in the next meeting that is more narrow, consistent with some of the suggestions tonight. But to sit here and go through this line item by line item, word by word, is an exercise in absurdity. It is 9:30 or 10:30, I can't.
9:30.
We'll be here half the night trying to get agreement on this because our positions are so far apart right now.
Actually, I don't think what I heard Elaine just say, I don't.
Well, I
don't
made a
agree with
motion.
it.
I'd like to
But
see if we
you-
can get to-
We have a motion to table. Do we have a second?
I will second the motion.
Okay, motion to table and second. Any comments by the commissioners?
I think we need to adopt this immediately because we have members of this committee that are eager to get started, but they don't want to get started until they have a direction set. So I think tabling this is just pushing that off. I think we should go ahead, give them this resolution with items 1 and 2. We'll reword number 2. We'll add in Don Curley's targets.
Can I ask a point of
to
procedure?
Wait a minute, that's a separate
All right, shouldn't we just
motion.
take the vote?
I'm going to call the motion.
No, we said, I said at the last meeting, and the parliamentarian said, nah, you can discuss stuff like this. So I
Well,
asked
that's
him-
going to be it.
There's a motion on the floor,
Right.
so
It's been
you
seconded.
need to act on that motion unless someone wants to offer an amendment to it.
Right.
Well, I think, Kevin, what you said and what everyone said here is, let's take number 2. We've told the staff what we want in number 2. Let them come back to us next meeting with something in number 2. You know?
For example, I don't necessarily agree with this, what's in number 2. Now, I mean, it doesn't address, unless you're referring to C as your capital programs, I don't think it addresses that adequately.
We're going to add that.
We're adding E.
The vote.
Okay. We have a
Right.
vote. We have a motion on the floor and second to,
This is to table.
What are we going to do, Kevin?
You need
call
some,
the vote.
Just
my
vote.
suggestion, Bill, is we ask the staff to come back with something that's more consistent with our discussion than this throw everything up against the wall and see what
All right.
sticks, which is what we got.
I'm sorry but, I want to discuss some of the merits of his position. I'm sorry. Can the committee meet without this? I mean, we have the committee, it's already been formed, so we're not preventing them from meeting, are we?
well, it's pretty hard to meet with.
We
that.
have to grant them authority, we have to grant them the authority to be able to meet with staff and get information.
Okay,
I think
so-
it's important to give them
So
a
for them to
resolution.
meet, there has to be a motion.
Has to be a resolution.
Okay, so can we make the motion that allows them to meet and then meet the substance of what Kevin said? Well, I'm sorry, John, go ahead.
There's a motion to table on the floor.
Right.
So let's vote on that.
All in favor of tabling, say aye.
Aye.
We'll show hands. All opposed?
Opposed.
Bill? 3-3 with Billy.
Motion failed.
That's right.
Okay.
Motion fails.
So I motion to adopt Resolution 2010-10. The first page, items 1 and 2, however, will strike earn income taxes from the second whereas clause. And item number 2A will read, review operating revenue and expenses in order to make recommendations for the 2011 budget. We will move D up, so to identify revenue enhancement strategies becomes C, and then C becomes D, and we add E, review capital funding requirements.
Did you want to add in the targets, benchmarks?
And Don, I would like Don to give me just something on that targets. I missed some of his verbiage. But 500,000, 1 million, 1.5 million, $2 million targets for cutting expenses.
Don's suggestion is M without the specific numbers. If you go, that's how that was blended into this resolution, without the numbers.
Okay, so we can move M up as part of 2, and it will read, identify expenditure reductions in the amount of 500,000, 1 million, 1.5, and 2 million as requested by the board, and corresponding tax level needed to balance the budget, assuming those expenditure reductions.
So are we doing this piecemeal?
I
Made
don't.
a motion.
I've
I understand,
already-
but I.
Kevin,
Yeah.
just to get, here's where I'm at.
But I want to,
I'm
I'm
striking-
asking John about process because there's,
The process is, if John makes his motion and someone seconds it, we'll have some discussion, and then we'll take a vote.
Do you want to add a number in
right,
one?
I want to add a couple of things, just,
Fine.
so do I do
You'll
it
have an
now?
opportunity
Do
to
we,
do that after.
John
George
Rice, do we
seconded.
get a second, then there's an amendment? Or do
Right.
we amend before it gets seconded?
Yeah. Well,
Okay.
the difference is that we're not introducing something. This is a resolution, we're passing it. I don't want
passing
to
it.
pass it tonight.
All right.
I'm willing to discuss it, but I think we should pass it at next meeting. We shouldn't
But that's
pass
what
that-
I, well, that's,
Yeah.
but
All right, well, that's what I'm, just
that's,
giving
that's
my
part of my
position.
problem, is I don't even, at the end of this, we're going to have somebody have to reread back to us exactly what we said, and I don't know how accurate the notes are going to be, so, I mean, Bill, we don't have that much of a fundamental disagreement.
I've stated my edits. They're a matter of record. If anyone else has anything they'd like to add, we can, if we get a second on this, we can do that. We can get this done. We don't need to put it off another 2 or 3 or 4 weeks. Okay, that's the extent of my edits, and I'm striking section 3 altogether.
Do we want to add a number into section 1? 9, I propose 9.
We know how many
Yes.
people are there.
Well, there's
Seven.
7 now,
Seven.
but
It's
we
seven.
want, do you want the option of adding a couple of more if they apply?
And you have to say of up to.
No, it was 7, it's fine, isn't it?
Well, Elaine asked the question, do you want to have an option of adding more? And then if you do that,
Once we have our charge, there may be people who step up.
Of up to.
Once we have this charge, there may be people who have been waiting.
I would
who step up.
suggest that we make it consist of up to 9 volunteers.
Now, wait, you're taking changes to your motion.
Well, I'm sorry, this is still, it hasn't been seconded, so this is still my motion.
Haven't we appointed 7 people?
Yes.
Well, that's fine, let's let the 7 people go to work.
but Elaine's suggesting that you could have, you want to add people later.
We can always add people later.
Then you have to come back and change it, and
Right,
that's what she's trying to cover off
No,
now.
but then
is-
you're going to ask people to come in, it's going to take 2 or 3 months, they're going to come in back
That's
in
why
the
you should,
process.
that's why you should have supported my motion, Bill.
I
No,
did.
no, we don't need, no, by setting it up to 9, the 7 that have been appointed are already appointed, the committee can stand, they don't need to have 9.
Yeah.
Hasn't been, you're not ready yet.
John, your language with E that Elaine suggested did not add.
You can't speak without going to the mic.
And not only that, we're not
wait,
open to
we're
public
not there
comment
yet.
yet.
Okay, Bill Spingler, I suggested E would be review capital funding requirements.
And I had added and funding accumulated leave debt.
Thank you.
And,
In
Mr.
funding.
Fisher, you did indicate you wanted to include M, but then later you indicated you didn't want to include M, 3M.
No, I-
At least that's the way I heard it.
No, in my motion, I did include.
No, you took it out
I
again.
Well, I moved M up into section 2.
No, but then you said you eliminate all of the items in 3.
I'm
heard
sorry.
I heard what Bill
Thank
Stiegler
you.
heard, whether I'm right or wrong.
Well, I moved it, and then I eliminate all the rest of 3. So
Okay.
item M gets moved up, becomes D with the changes I had stated.
All right.
And then all the rest of 3, for my motion, can be eliminated.
All right. Well, let's have the staff put that together and put it on the agenda for the next meeting.
We have a motion on the floor.
Yeah, there's
Do we
a
have
motion.
a second?
You don't have a motion on the floor if you don't have a second.
Second.
Now we have a motion and a second. Is there any further discussion by the commissioners?
I'm very confused. Are we going to amend this motion? Now, should I amend the motion? Should we?
Yes, if
Okay.
you want to, now you can
Right.
do that.
All right. I propose, if we do go down this path, at least putting some kind of limit initially on the committee. And I propose at least starting off a 1-year term. So I would suggest in the 1, 2, 3, the third whereas clause, the committee should be established with a 1-year term. I'm not clear, since I don't have it in front of me and nobody's read it back, exactly what is stated under item 2. But I also would like to see, potentially, this group help develop recommendations regarding user fees for select programs provided by the township, so that there's a differential for users and non-users.
But isn't that covered under analyze existing township services?
I would like to propose that wide-ranging definition be narrowed to specific township services or programs.
Well, you could put that under D, to identify revenue enhancement strategies and opportunities, including potential fee assessments or whatever you're talking about.
User fees.
User fees.
Okay, fair enough. But item B, or is it A now? No, it's B. To analyze existing township services or programs, I think they ought to be given a specific list as opposed to an all-encompassing, wide-open everything.
Kevin, would it help to make it at the discretion of the Board of Commissioners? So that way it could vary from time to time based on what we're asking for.
I'd say I disagree with that, in that this is one of the things that I'd like this committee to weigh in on. What services and programs are we willing to reassess with the eyes that we may be cutting, so that those thoughts are coming from our public or our committee as opposed to us? That's one of the things I'd like to hear from them.
But it's also what public participation is about.
Well, right, and that's what we're trying to do, is encourage more public participation. And
You're encouraging public participation of a group of 9.
as I said, I'd like for them to be soliciting public input. And that's one of their, in my opinion, one of their sources of.
Again, we have a disagreement there.
Can I, John Rice, do you recall in the administrative code, we have a section that pertains to our boards and commissions? And I believe there's a global set of direction for boards and commissions in general that covers kind of a catch-all? Or do we need to be specific? Like in terms of, one of the recommendations here is to set the term at 1 year. Do we need to do that on the board and commission level, or is that a catch-all in the administrative code? Because I seem to think
Each
that
board and commission has the term set out.
the term is unique then?
Yes, it's termed.
Okay,
Yeah, I would establish.
set it in there, that's
I
fine.
would establish it in the resolution.
It's 4 years, it's 5 years.
And do we want to set a frequency of how often they meet in public?
Well, all meetings should be public.
Well, but how often? Is it once per month, twice a month?
Kevin, could you wrap up your motion?
Do we want to hear from some of the committee members?
Yeah,
before we
I think
come-
I'm done, but again, I'm not, who's going to be able to read back to us tonight exactly what this
Well,
thing
I'm going to
says?
recommend that we vote on it at the next meeting.
Well, that's what I suggest, okay.
Yeah.
Well, it's
We're
good.
just
It's
hashing it
moved
out.
and seconded, and there's an amendment
John
by
Rice,
Kevin.
you want to say something?
Well, you have a motion from John Fisher and a second. You've had some discussion. Kevin's offering up an amendment. I guess the question in my mind is, what are you going to vote on then? You voting on, is John, you accepting his amendment?
Kevin, do you want to state your amendment?
Let me read what I understand Kevin's amendment is. Under 2D, to identify revenue enhancement strategies and opportunities, Kevin, you want to add including an evaluation of user fees
Services for like select programs,
and services?
for services,
For services,
for select programs.
okay. We've changed the number of volunteers up to 9,
You have the term of 1 year,
term of 1 year.
and we have the disagreement, and this is, that I think John and Elaine and I have a disagreement over, that B, I think what they're proposing is to analyze existing township services or programs.
At the board's discretion.
Right.
Is what was proposed, I think.
That was my suggestion, but Kevin, you had a different suggestion.
I think we need to be.
You wanted to specify the
Correct.
specific programs and services that they were going to analyze.
Correct, and, right.
I mean, one of the ways you can solve that is to, well, you can do what John suggested, to analyze existing township services or programs as identified by the board. You could do something like that. Or if you want to limit it to whatever you want to limit it to, Kevin, you can plug that right in here. I mean, that's your two options.
So if we say as identified by the board, they don't have the ability to go out and do the analysis until we give them a list?
Correct.
Okay. Then I
Correct.
think
You
I
have
could-
to have some further discussion.
Okay, then I think I could live with that language for tonight.
Okay, we have
Mr. Fisher?
Kevin's amendments. Do you accept those amendments, John? Commissioner Fisher? Yeah. Okay.
Yeah. Well, okay.
I can accept that amendment.
What I would like to see us do is, for the staff to put this together, we might charge the group to meet and let them come back to us with some recommendations too. And at the next meeting, we can vote on this. They can meet before that, pick a chairman.
I actually think that's a good suggestion. Put this on paper, send it out to the
Preferable.
commissioners for a draft, send it to the
Tell
committee
them
members.
to meet, elect
Yeah.
a chairman. These are the ideas.
Yeah.
What do they think about them? Does anyone want to add, anyone want to take out, and get their thoughts, and we'll vote on it next meeting.
That's a great idea.
Yeah, I agree with that suggestion.
So sure, John, does this committee have the ability to do this? Do they need to be given, in this case, they'd be acting as an ad hoc committee? Because they're not being.
They were appointed by the Board of Commissioners. They were a committee appointed by the board.
They've been appointed, and Bill, your suggestion
We-
is to put this together in the
Send it-
resolution and get their input on it before you finally adopt
At the
it.
next meeting, ask them to elect a chairman and a secretary,
Yes.
and then get us that, and give us our input before we adopt this at the next meeting. They can come to the meeting, or they can give it to us in writing before. If they want to come to the meeting and speak, they can.
Right. If that's all they're intending to do,
Yeah,
I
that's all.
don't see any problem with that. But you still have a motion on the floor.
Well, I will withdraw my motion. Can I withdraw my motion? Is that a valid?
Sure.
Yeah. I'll withdraw my motion in favor of Bill Spingler's suggestion that the edits that we've suggested tonight be put in writing and provided to the board, the Citizens Budget and Finance Advisory Committee, and that they shall meet in the next week.
Week and a half, yeah.
Yeah, before the next Board of Commissioners meeting, and look over the suggested resolution and comment back to us. And then we will introduce that resolution, or actually pass that or vote on that resolution in the next meeting.
Bill suggested they appoint a president and a secretary as well, and
but
I
they
think,
meet with-
that might be a good way of having a, single spokesman for the group at the meeting, so I think maybe that should be part of the,
Okay, and
You could do that tonight if you want to, or if you want to let the board, the group pick
I
their own.
think they
that's
can
up to
pick
you.
their own. I
Let
have no
them
issue
pick
with
their
that.
own.
pick
their
own.
Yeah.
Yeah, this board's never done that with the other
I got about
boards.
5 absentee ballots.
I got some of them, old code. Okay, do we need to take a vote on that, or can we just proceed?
I think John withdrew his motion, so we don't have to vote.
Okay, then,
But the
new
motion, the
new
motion is,
for the staff to develop this resolution,
Right.
to get it, to ask the committee to meet, to form how they want to form with a, chairman and a secretary, whatever they want to do, and then review this and come back to us with their thoughts on it.
And elect a
we'll
president
be-
and a secretary.
Yeah, it'll be on the agenda for the next meeting. I so move.
motion made second. Any comments by the board members? Any public comment? Brief.
One suggestion I would make is having a liaison that was brought up earlier from the board, at one point of contact rather than the whole board for all of the communications.
Well, I'm the chair of the finance committee, so I'll do that.
Okay.
Hi, I'm Jim Schneller. I live in the township, and I've been at a lot of meetings and watched the process, and this is a wonderful step. I wanted to just make a personal comment on the fact that one-year term is really kind of hamstringing the effort, in my opinion, because people will have that in the back of their mind, how perhaps they'll be adjusting priorities and things according to that, whereas we're actually past a year past the beginning of this, or the public knowledge of this unfortunate series of events. And I think a year from now, we may be in a similar state of limbo. I hope with more progress made. Also, I think that as long as you're getting so particular in Section 2 that you want to say something about to identify the issues raised by the public, or to quantify things raised by the public, because down the road, somebody with the specificity you're putting into this, somebody could feasibly say, well, it doesn't say to ask the public. And perhaps even language about a mandatory meeting every 2 months.
I think the board
I
could
think
get
we
back
got
to us.
enough, yeah.
Maybe the board could get back to a recommendation whether you should meet quarterly, how often you should meet with the public.
Thank you, Jim.
All right, go.
Made and seconded. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Thank you. I'd like to modify our agenda just a little bit and move up the item on ceasefire Pennsylvania.
I think that's a good
Hank, you
idea.
want to jump on that?
Yeah. Okay, we're down at public safety, and this is item number DD on your agenda.
DD?
It is ceasefire PA presentation on lost and stolen handguns. We have with us tonight Jim Higgins, the former commissioner from the First Ward, a representative of ceasefire Pennsylvania. Jim had an idea concerning the requirement to have residents who have their handguns stolen or lost to report that. So we asked Jim to come in and give us an overview of the proposal so we could consider it and perhaps bring this forward with an introduction for an ordinance at a not too distant meeting. Jim? I should note that Jim Higgins, by the way, is a former First Ward Commissioner.
You said that.
And did I say that?
Yep.
Very well versed in these things. So Jim, welcome.
Thank you, Hank, and thank you, John, for moving us up on the agenda. I'm here tonight to speak for Ceasefire Pennsylvania, and I have a colleague with me, Diane Edbrell, previously our executive director. I am the treasurer of Ceasefire Pennsylvania and a board member, and if you are not familiar with our organization, we're the largest organization in Pennsylvania dedicated to passing responsible gun safety and gun violence prevention laws. We have about 5,000 members statewide. And by the way, I live in the township on Chestnut Lane. I'm asking tonight that the board take action at its next meeting to introduce an ordinance which would require residents of the township who own handguns and whose handgun is lost or stolen to report it to the authorities, the police or the constable or the sheriff, within 72 hours of discovering the fact that it is lost or stolen. And that if the prescription in the ordinance is that if that is not done within 72 hours, then this person is subject to prosecution as a misdemeanor. I think it's a misdemeanor of the second degree. The maximum punishment is $1,000 fine and 90 days in jail, or both. Now, what is this all about? Well, the name of the ordinance is Lost or Stolen Reporting, and it's been enacted in 24 municipalities in the state of Pennsylvania in the last 20 months. And the evil that it's getting at, if you talk to our police all over the state, is there is a trade or a commerce in handguns from the legal market into the illegal market, and it works like this. Think of the concept of straw purchasing. If an individual has a criminal record and wants to buy a single handgun or a whole raft of handguns, he goes to a friend who has no criminal record, and the two of them go to a gun shop. And the person with no criminal record gives his identification. The gun dealer runs that through the NICS, which is a national inventory of criminal records, and the person with no criminal record then comes up as okay to purchase. They go outside the gun store, and the person with the record then takes the purchase inventory. It could be one gun or it could be 100, because in Pennsylvania there is no limit on the number of handguns you can buy in one transaction or in multiple transactions. So outside the gun store, the weapons are transferred. A fee is paid then to the person that has no record, and both go off, and they have then consummated a very serious transaction, which in our state and in many other states is fomenting the trafficking in illegal guns, but more important is the source of crime. Because what happens is this: the weapon invariably will be used in crime. It is then traced by the authorities back to the dealer, and the dealer then, by law, must produce records of that transaction, and on the record is shown the name of the person and the address of the person that purchased the weapon. When the police go to that person, the stock answer as to where did you lose the weapon or what happened to your weapon because it was used to kill somebody is that I lost it or it was stolen. And that's the end of the line for the police. The police can't prosecute that person, the authorities cannot prosecute that person because the defense is valid. I didn't know what happened to my weapon. If we pass this ordinance, that defense will be taken away, and the person then will have two choices: stop dealing in illegal guns or risk the possibility of prosecution. Now, you may ask, well, what does all this have to do with Radnor? We don't have a problem with illegal guns in Radnor. I want to call on Diane Edbrell to talk about why this is important, because we're part of a mosaic here. Radnor is part of hundreds of municipalities in the state, and we're all in this together. We're all fighting to stop the flow of illegal guns. So, Diane, please.
Jim, can I ask you just a quick question?
Yes.
Is there any risk I don't have a problem with your concept, but is there any risk that this would be subject to some kind of legal challenge that the township would have to defend itself against, that would then result in us incurring additional legal fees on top of all the legal fees we've incurred already?
There are organizations that do contest statutes in this area. There are 24 municipalities ahead of us that have already enacted this. Philadelphia has been the target of one lawsuit. That has gone up, and the statute has been upheld as a valid exercise of the police power. Actually, there were more narrow grounds. It was a standing question. The plaintiffs were held not to have standing. But in my judgment, I don't think there's a risk to the township because so many other municipalities have done this.
Well, one question before Diane gets up, and that is has there been a challenge to any of these ordinances on the basis that it's not a matter for the local municipality to deal with it, rather it's state law, and state law preempts?
Oh, very much. Because Pennsylvania for the last 15 years has had a preemption statute in the matter of guns. That is, only the state legislature can legislate in the area of guns. However, this is a little bit different. This is not like saying you can only buy one handgun a month, or you must not be a felon to buy a handgun, or you must report, or you cannot deal in machine guns and that sort of thing. This is different. This is a reporting requirement related to your ownership and the fact that that your weapon has been lost or stolen. So far that challenge has not been successful.
Let me ask a follow-up question. So Jim, assuming we did this, and they report it to Radnor Township, what do we do with that information? Just sit on it? Is there a database? Oh, is Diane going to cover that?
Diane.
Okay.
Hi all again. Most of you are familiar with my former work at Ceasefire PA, but for those of you who are not, and for those who might be watching from home, in addition to having been the executive of Ceasefire PA for many years here in the Commonwealth, I was also for many years a prosecutor in New York City, and in that capacity learned a lot about gun violence, gun trafficking, and how to prevent it effectively. To answer your question, Kevin, let's just say this is what happens. Somebody's home is burglarized while they're on vacation, in addition to the laptop and the pearl necklace and, great Antilles silver. The firearm or the two firearms that are owned by that family are stolen. People get home, they discover the theft, they report it to the police. There are a few things that happen. Number one, there's that crime, and the information that the police get about that crime is going to immediately go to the top of the list, because somebody who's burglarizing homes, running around with a gun, is a lot more dangerous than somebody who's running around with great Antilles silverware, just from a protecting the community perspective, from protecting the law enforcement officers themselves who are charged with protecting us. So it's important information for police to know that there are people in Radnor who have stolen firearms from homes.
So they put in some kind of database so that the police and TE know that the gun was stolen in Radnor, and if the guy goes over to the next township, how?
Well, Lieutenant Antonini can confirm or correct me if I'm wrong, but my understanding is that there is a great deal of information sharing and cooperation among the various jurisdictions about all sorts of thefts, because something that's happening in Radnor today could just as easily be happening in TE or in Montgomery County tomorrow. And so this sort of thing does get shared, this sort of information does get shared. As far as I know, there is no central state database of stolen firearms. However, with all lost property, this really benefits the people in the community too, because if that stolen property is recovered, you want to have a report of it so that if the police recover it, they know who to return it to. If your car is stolen, obviously there's all sorts of protection and insurance regulations that require you to report that, but you want to get your car back. If you don't tell anyone it's stolen, how can that happen? So that's another good reason for reporting it to the police. There is sharing of information, whether it's more informally, as I believe it is the case, or perhaps even formally, as I might not be aware of. I think police need to know that people are stealing guns, if that's what's going on in the community. There's a little bit, I think, of difference in sort of the typical straw purchasing scenario that Jim outlined and the way it plays out in communities like ours. I think, for one thing, while frequently it does happen right outside the gun shop, as Jim described. Very frequently, there is a great deal more attenuation. And so the person who bought the gun because he didn't have the criminal background may hand it off to somebody. It might not be outside the gun shop. It might be next Friday in a schoolyard, or it might be in his garage. And that gun may change hands a number of times before it ultimately ends up being recovered in connection with a crime. So there's very little way for the police to work their way back to the original straw purchaser who broke the law by transferring that handgun without that kind of information. And then, if somebody did that, then if they're convicted of that, then they now have a criminal record, so they won't be able to continue fueling the illegal market. I think what I wanted to say was that in our community, we don't see it like that. Nobody's really going to the gun store and buying a truckload of guns. But, there are people, and there are probably not many, but we all know someone in our community who maybe has a substance abuse problem, who's involved with illegal drug activity, who for whatever reason has been able to avoid getting a criminal record, albeit being a drug addict and an illegal drug user. And those are folks who can go to a gun shop and can buy a gun. They know that the person selling them their drugs wants that gun, probably wants it more than cash. So that's sort of something that happens in a community like Radnor, maybe with more frequency than the kind of overt criminality that I think is more typical, but it happens nonetheless. I think that there's another thing that happens here. People are going to be concerned, well, how do I know if my gun is lost or stolen? I had a gun in my attic that I inherited from my grandfather 30 years ago. This kind of ordinance, if it's publicized, and we do hope if it's enacted that it would be publicized, will get people to take a minute and think back, because I know in my own family and in my neighbors' families, this happens. People have guns in their homes that they've lost track of, that maybe are sitting in a shoebox on the top shelf of a closet somewhere, and maybe that gun was taken. Maybe they need to go and see and say, gee, what happened to that gun? I better make sure it's still there. And maybe then they'll decide that they want to put it in a gun safe to secure it, so that what we're trying to protect against is even less likely to happen. So I think, did I answer all your questions about this? Thank you very much for your time and attention to this. It's really important, and I think also when we're protecting our youth in our community, we've all heard about tragedies here, and the more awareness we have about where the guns are that we believe we own, the better for everyone in the township.
Thank you, all of you. And should we come back in the first meeting in February if your sentiment here is to introduce it? Okay.
Yeah, just before you go, Jim, one of the things that struck me in the materials that you forwarded over to me was, I believe, a letter from the Pennsylvania State Police where they were endorsing this type of ordinance for municipalities. Could you just tell us?
Yes, Commissioner Pulaski is the Commissioner of State Police. That letter doesn't have a date on it. It should, but he's been actively behind this ordinance for 24 months, 2 years. And because the state police have an interest in knowing what's going on in the illegal gun market. And if every township has an ordinance like this, well, not every township will, but if more get them, then that'll be more records and more. It's a greater crime-fighting tool that'll be available to the state police.
And I know that the material was forwarded over to the police department. AJ, have you had a chance to take a look at it? Give us any thoughts on it?
I have. The big word here is discovery, loss, or theft. If somebody does not know it's missing in a home and legitimately discovers it as a result of either being found illegally on someone else, say that family member that needed money for drugs and they didn't know it was taken, that person wouldn't necessarily be prosecuted. I think where he's going with this is you know it's missing, you know it's stolen, you don't report it, and then it's found sometime later where it shouldn't be. Just to let the commissioners know how it works here is the person would report the lost or stolen vehicle, gun to us. we'd have them complete a property report and an unsworn falsification statement. So if they lied on when it was missing or when it was lost, we could maybe possibly prosecute on that as well. At that point, if they know the serial numbers, most people do, we would enter it into what's known as Pennsylvania Clean. It's a law enforcement network. The serial number, the type of weapon, date it was lost, the person that's missing it, and our incident number. That information will be forwarded to the federal level where they have a database as well. For example, just this month, we had a weapon stolen about 10 years ago in a guy's box in his vehicle. He was moving. Just this month, we were notified by another department in Pennsylvania that was located on an individual. She was arrested. It had the serial numbers obliterated. They were able to raise them up, but it was a stolen weapon 10 years later. So it does work when it's entered.
Can I ask, do you have any data or even anecdotes as to how effective this has been in other communities and what kind of direct effect it's had?
I mean, I have to get back to you on that. It's relatively new, the last 18 or 20 months. Pittsburgh and Philadelphia have had lots of good experiences as a result, but I'll get that information for you.
Is there academic research on it, Mr. Higgins? If so, you could just include the links to the academic
Okay.
works, because
Let me
I would
get
like
that
to
for
take a
you
look
also.
and I can get the
Between
links.
Diane and me, we'll get
Just
that.
links would be fine, that would all.
Okay.
Thank you very much, and then we'll direct the staff to draft an ordinance for introduction at the next meeting. Kevin, back to you.
You gonna say something, Hank, before
No,
I,
no.
The next item on the agenda is the schedule of bills payable, item 10-01B. And it's a grand total being requested for authorization of for disbursement of $1,517,667.45. The bills have been approved by the respective department head, verified and processed by the finance department, and within the total 2009 and 2010. So I guess some of this, Karen, pertains to still leftover 2009?
Yes, we still have a little bit.
Okay.
We still have a little bit more in '09 still to come.
Okay, so it's 2009, 2010 budgetary limits. I'd like to introduce this. I have a couple of questions, but I'd like to introduce it with one change where we omit a payment listed on page 1, which is identified as page 1, under administration, and it is the line item 4361. It's the second line item, 4361, for $18,000, $45.41. So
Yeah, that's 4362.
It's invoice number 1296180.
Yeah, it's up here, 4362.
Oh, I got the wrong one. I'm sorry.
Go with the invoice number.
Sorry about that. That's correct. It's
1296180.
Right, thank you.
All right, you
Account
move,
code's 4362.
you move the approval, deleting that one, and I will second it.
I'd like to, I just,
I'm sorry. Wasn't the point to pay that to a certain point, or wouldn't that make more sense?
no, we're going to withhold
Just
the
withhold it.
whole invoice right now
Now,
till,
we're paying all the other ones. There are 5 of them, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. We're going to pay 6 of those 7.
it's that specific invoice is not going to be paid at this point in time until we get additional clarification, the whole invoice. And then I just had a couple of questions. My first question is, Bill Hagan, just educate me for a minute. I saw somewhere in here that there was $3,000 paid to Mayfield Gardens, and it was identified as snow hauling?
Yeah, that was after the storm that we had, the 19th, 20th, 21st.
When you say snow hauling, do you mean plowing, or do they actually haul snow?
No, we have to clear out the business district. The size of the piles up there, it's a practice that we always do after storms.
It's stockpiled in Skunk Hollow, right?
That's correct.
Okay. And then I had a question for Tom Blumstrom on page 9. These are 2 of them. This guy, David Brodia, for the fall, I don't know how you say the name, the fall indoor tennis instruction. How many sessions do we pay that guy for?
That's programming ran through the fall, ran in early winter, and same thing for squash. It's an 80-20 we would have received 20% over and above whatever the amount we paid him.
So he gets 80% of the registration fees and we keep 20% of it, is that?
That is correct.
Okay. And then I don't know if it's something else they're doing. At the bottom of that page, it says World Cup Soccer Academy, and then it says basketball camp.
That's a different program that took place at Sulpizio Gym.
Is it World Cup Soccer Academy doing basketball, or is it just misidentified?
It should say Sports Academy, I believe, but
Okay.
yes, that's the same company.
Okay, thank you.
Any other questions?
I have a couple questions. On page 3, under police, there's $274 listed as petty cash, either Bill or Lieutenant. Could you explain what that would be?
That's for the police department, per Karen, it was replacing the petty cash.
Your mic's not on, Bill.
They have a $300 petty cash fund in the police department, and that is replenishing it with receipts showing where the money was spent.
Okay.
So that might be something they replenish once a quarter, twice a year, or every month?
It's about every 2 months.
Okay.
Any further, Don? Anyone else have any questions? Okay, motion made and seconded. Any public comment? All in favor?
Aye.
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 All right, let me get myself organized on this one. I guess we have is it a corrected resolution, John Rice, or a new resolution? What?
They added the,
I understand what they did, but it says resolution, so,
Bill will have to explain what's been.
I understand what's been done, but I
the
just want to make sure
attachment.
what I'm introducing. Am I introducing a corrected resolution, a new resolution, a replacement resolution?
New resolution.
The new
New
resolution.
resolution.
Okay. So do we rescind the old one?
Yes.
Repeal, it's right in the
Okay,
resolution.
that's, okay, got it. So Resolution 2010-08, setting the township compensation. So
It should
Bill,
be, yes, it should be compensation administration plan.
Township.
Per the last meeting, there was some confusion about whether we were just setting the salary compensation versus total compensation for the employees. And with the board's directive, you asked to have it a total compensation, which would include salary and longevity, and that's what you have before you tonight. So you should, it says salary on the resolution, you should make a motion to make sure that it says compensation administration plan.
So where it says 2010 salary administration plan, it should say
Compensation,
2010
yeah, there and
compensation plan?
Yes,
And in the heading.
and the heading.
That's what I'm, right, that's what I'm
Yeah,
looking
it's
at.
2 places.
Oh, yes, I see, in the heading and then the third line of the resolution. Is that correct? Am I seeing this accurately, John?
Correct.
Okay. I'm going to ask my same kind of questions I asked last time. Is this right? Has it been checked?
Yes.
Can
Karen and I have checked it.
Can you give me more confidence than last time? Since I got
The
this.
issue with last time was more of, we were talking about salary versus compensation, and that was the confusion. This
Okay.
is a compensation, which is compensation for the employee, which is her total compensation package.
Okay.
Can the board get a copy of this with the names included? This is a redacted copy showing only the titles without the names.
well, the one we had last time had the names, so.
Yeah, we need to have, well, the board needs to have the names. I understand for this purposes, I'm okay with this being done this way.
You didn't say the one for the last one? You didn't say the last one with all the names?
No, I'd like to have a schedule with all the
Yeah,
names.
we ought to have just a final
Yeah,
version.
I don't think that's an issue. And then recognizing that under right to know, if any resident wants to see a copy of this with the names, they can simply request that document.
Absolutely.
I'll move the approval.
Second.
Made and seconded. Any further comments? Any public comment?
Good evening. Dan Sherry, 3 Donald Lane. I watched with great interest the last meeting, and in particular, an amendment that was offered by Commissioner Schaefer with respect to a board policy of document redaction for documents that were going to be posted on Radnor Township's official website. That, I believe, was the policy that was set forth, and it was approved by this board with a 5-2 vote. The only two commissioners who voted against the amendment were Commissioner Fisher and Commissioner Curley. And one of the defenses to having that amendment being passed was that anybody could come in and receive the document. Tonight, we have this document. It's in the Township building, and as Commissioner Fisher pointed out, it has been redacted. I'm curious as to who determined that this document should be redacted and who further decided that a redacted version would be the one placed on the table for people coming in. I don't recall that being voted on by this particular board. I find that very disconcerting. I find any policy of document redaction for documents that have been expressly identified as being discoverable under the Right to Know Act to be a bad policy in and of itself. And tonight, to see that policy apparently expanded to documents that aren't posted on the website but are actually given to the public in a public meeting.
Okay, Dan,
very,
Mr.
very
Sherry,
interesting. Do you have an
Mr.
answer
Sherry.
to my question, Commissioner?
I'm going to.
Okay.
We're going to ask the staff what happened. My guess, and it's only a guess, is that this is what was prepared to be posted on the website for the meeting.
This is a new resolution. The other one you voted on to and was put on the website per your direction.
Right.
This resolution was prepared without names, based on the same, what we've done with the last resolution. You can have names on it, you can have names off it, it's
No,
really
the
your
question
discretion.
is, was there a conscious decision to put the redacted version
This
on
is
the back
the
table?
resolution we put together. Yeah, you could put it on there if you wanted to, it's up to you.
Well, wasn't that the sense of our motion? That
Yeah, it was only the
redacted?
website that was going to be redacted.
Oh.
Right.
I don't think.
Just sounds like an oversight,
just-
Dan. There's
Yeah,
no-
it's an oversight, but actually, I don't think we should, the names need to be on here for us to vote for this. Because one of the issues that we dealt with in the past is that the names weren't on the list, and in a lot of times, the lists weren't correct. So, at least from an official action of this board, I think this board needs to see the list with the names. I'm okay voting on this tonight if I'm delivered a copy with the names. and I-
We can get a copy of it with the
Yeah, I have
names
full
on it right
faith
now.
in Bill, I'm not, yeah, I know you're gonna get it to me tomorrow, that's not the issue.
Is that where she just went?
Yes.
Should we just
Well-
defer this for a few minutes, or?
I mean, what you can basically do, you can adopt this resolution with the attachment reflecting the names. If you want to wait till Karen comes back down with the list and the names added back onto it, you can do that. I don't know whether you're all going to read those names tonight, but what you will end up signing then will be this resolution with that attachment with the names on it.
Okay, I don't think I got a response to my question. Is it that this is an oversight, that this was done in error to not have the names on there, or is this a continuation in the spirit of the policy of document redaction that this board voted
Dan,
be an
actually,
amendment on?
Mr. Sherry, I
2 meetings
did
ago?
answer your question.
No, you didn't.
Yes,
You-
I did.
You referred my question to the
Right,
staff.
and
The
then I
response-
said, it
the response
appears
from
to
the
be,
staff-
excuse me.
What's the answer?
The answer is, it was an oversight. We're going to correct the matter. The only place we're redacting anything is the website, and that's out of courtesy to our employees. We have not impeded the right to know rules at all. You'll have a copy, and you can come in and get one. Anyone else wants to put a right to know request in can have it instantly.
Okay, well, that actually is more responsive than I thought I might get. Is now the position of the board that the only way the identities of these employees will be disclosed via a formal right-to-know request?
That's how it usually works in the state of Pennsylvania. If someone wants that information, Mr. Sherry, you make the request. I don't understand that, but I don't understand your question.
Well, I thought, Solicitor Rice, you specifically said at the last meeting that these documents are discoverable under the Right-to-Know Act.
Correct.
And it was further discussed that these documents would be put onto Radnor Township's official website,
Correct.
but that it would be redacted.
The names were, right, and I think what Mr. Nagel just told you is that that was discussed and decided that that information, without the names on it, would be put on the website out of consideration of the staff. So but that doesn't mean that the full schedule with all the names isn't sitting here for anyone, including yourself, that wants to walk in and get it. So there's a difference between putting everything out there onto the website. Not everything in this township building is on the website.
Clearly, there's a significant difference between the spirit of the law and following it and the letter of the law. I would agree with you on that, sir.
But there's a difference between that and then what is available here under the Right to Know Act. There's exceptions, and I think it was clear at the last meeting, and I think it's still clear tonight, that that information has always been available. It's always going to be available under the Right to Know Act.
Well, no, what confused it, Solicitor Rice, is that we have a document here that was about to be voted on without Commissioner Fisher getting involved that had the names redacted. This is not a document that's on a website, sir. This is a document that's on a table at an official Board of Commissioners meeting. So when I saw that, it appeared to be an expansion of a philosophy that was advanced via an amendment. I have since been told that this is merely an oversight, that we decided not to put the names of the specific employees on this particular document. And I trust it won't happen again.
Yeah, Mr. Chair, that was my decision, and it was my error.
So just to be clear, the proposal is to introduce resolution number 2010-08 with changing compensation in the header and line 3 changing administration to compensation as well, and to replace the current attachment with a new attachment that identifies the individuals by name.
That's what's in front of the board.
Okay.
Right.
And I won't sign until that is complete.
Just want to make sure everybody's on the same page.
Move the approval.
I'm sorry,
Yeah,
but
go ahead.
doesn't it's not replacing the attachment, it's adding to the attachment. I mean,
Well, I
it's a
think it's
subtle
going to be,
distinction
Well,
that
it's
you
a
made,
corrected
but-
copy.
I think
that
there's
has
going to be a
the
new
names.
attachment, but it's the
Okay.
same.
It's going to have the
It's
names.
the same attachment,
Very
just
good.
with the
Thank
names
you.
not redacted.
So do we have I think we have
I
an
move.
introduction and a second? Do we need a second?
Yeah.
Second?
I'll second it.
Okay, we have motion and a second. Any other comments from the board? Any further comment from the public? All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Thank you.
That's it for finance and audit, and under library, just a reminder of something we announced at the last meeting. There are 2 vacancies on the board of the Memorial Library of Radnor, and
Kevin,
those.
I don't interrupt. We spoke to the library this morning, actually, and they the appointments were made last year, so we can dispense with that tonight.
So we don't have vacancies.
Not on the library memorial board.
You've been given incorrect information
Again.
Kevin. I don't know why you do this only to you. You're the only guy.
It's all these local Villanova guys getting back at me. You'll be happy to know, Bill, that Georgetown lost tonight to Syracuse. They got their butts kicked.
Seems to be a habit this year.
Hey.
All right. Personnel Administration, Mr. Fisher.
We have 2 vacancies on the Citizens Communication Council, and we also have 1 vacancy on the Ethics Board. Please send your letter of interest to Bill Martin, Acting Township Manager. Include your resume and cover letter for board review. We also have appointments to the chair and members of the standing committees.
So the appointments are made by the president. We're not voting.
Yeah, so does John have?
Yeah,
This is back.
our standing committees, chairs, and members are as follows. Open Space, Elaine Schaefer's chair, Bill Spengler and Hank Mahoney are members. Personnel and Administration, John Fisher's chair, Kevin Higgins and myself are members. Public Works and Sewer, Bill Spengler's chairing, Hank Mahoney and Don Curley are members. Finance and Audit is all commissioners, and at this time I will chair. Parks and Rec, I'm going to be the chair of Parks and Rec. Elaine Schaefer and John Fisher are members. Library, Kevin Higgins, chair. Elaine Fisher, Elaine Schaefer, John Fisher. It must be getting late. Are members. Community Development, Don Curley is going to be our chair. Hank Mahoney and John Fisher are members. Public Health, John Fisher's chairing. Myself and Don Curley are members. Public Safety, Hank Mahoney's chairing, Bill Spengler, and myself are members. Any questions?
Tell you, I would just about to mention on the ethics board, The current president serves, so you still have Hank Mahoney. On the Ethics Board, it's the president of the Board of Commissioners, so it'll be John Nagel, so you know.
Thank you.
And item V is being taken off the agenda. We are not going to be doing that tonight.
Parks and Rec. Tom, you want to give us a little rundown?
There's nothing on the agenda. We are in the midst of our youth basketball program. We have 1,240 children in the program. I thank so many volunteers who are coming out, and Bob Nicholas in particular. We're using gyms all throughout the community. We also have some ski trips planned that are coming up for February, so anyone's interested, please register early so we don't have any good trips go away. We also have the Willows Cottage project manager is going out to bid, and we will look forward to getting those in and having that on the agenda, hopefully for approval on the 8th.
Tom, what's the time frame for all of the bids, if you will?
All the bids, the next one, it's 4/12, I believe, is the date to be approved for the mechanical and the whole slot of them.
Right. Thank you. Any questions for Tom? Thank you. Public Health. John?
We have 2 vacancies on the Board of Health. Again, send your letter and resume to Bill Martin at 301 Ivan Avenue, Wayne, PA.
Bill, are we getting letters in?
I forward you the resumes as they come in.
Yeah, we had one for the comprehensive
We have a
plan
few
recently.
coming in here and there. We haven't had a tremendous response yet.
Yeah. Could you, in this packet, send each of us who have sent in so far, and maybe the board.
And what the openings are.
And maybe board, we have to start talking to people and ask them to apply.
Right.
Via email, I'll just send you the resumes, and I give you hard copies in your packet as they come in. We've only had a couple some come in so far.
Yeah, there's one tonight's package.
Yep. But I mean, it seems that the process has slowed up. I think the board has to ask some people to put their names forward.
Yeah, the more we can do to get the word out there, we're looking for
Lots of
qualified
good people
volunteers.
out there.
Well, we know a lot of people,
Yeah,
so
and-
if the board sees vacancies and you know somebody would be good, ask them to apply.
Yes.
Okay, no further report.
Public Safety, Hank?
All right, first item on the agenda is the consideration of ordinance number 2010-01 for prohibited parking on Conestoga Road on the north side at a point 220 feet west of West Wayne Avenue.
Move the approval?
Moved and second. Any commissioner comment? Any public comment? All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Next is consideration of ordinance number 2010-02 with regard to Plant Avenue to amend an earlier ordinance and extend parking on the north side of Plant Avenue from the intersection of Pennsylvania Avenue and Plant Avenue for 398 feet in an easterly direction.
Move the approval of the ordinance?
Moved and second. Any commissioner comment? Public comment? All in favor?
Aye.
Next is the consideration of ordinance number 2010-03, which involves prohibiting parking on West Wayne Avenue in the area of the drop box near the Wayne Post Office.
Move the approval of the ordinance?
Second. Moved and seconded. Any comments from the commissioners? Comments from the public? I've had some discussions with staff traffic and with AJ about this. The current signage that's been placed really can't be seen by people who are pulling up and parking there, so we have to look at that again and see if, in fact, I've informed personally 2 people that there's no parking, and I'm sure you can imagine the reaction. It wasn't to jump back in the car and move it. Moved and seconded. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Next is adoption of ordinance 2010-04 regarding restricting parking on the north side of Plant Avenue, a distance of 157 feet from Woodland Avenue in a westerly direction.
Move the approval?
Moved and seconded. Any additional discussion, commissioners? Public discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Any new commissioners can second anytime they want. Just keep it moving.
Working well without us.
Just, no, come on, get those seconds rolling. The chair shouldn't have to second. It's not fair.
Next item, actually, Kevin did second that last
I
one.
know, but John had to do one before that.
I was giving somebody else a chance.
I know, Kevin.
All right,
Like to educate them.
the next item is the Staff Traffic Committee report. You have before you the report from the committee from the meeting of January 19th, 2010. Any questions or comments?
Move be approved.
Second.
Moved and seconded. Further discussion from the
Can I
commission?
just ask a question? The traffic, it says traffic safety unit will place traffic counters for additional data. Is that happening now, or is that when the changes occur?
We have older counts. We're gonna get newer counts.
Okay.
Usually after the snow plowing, the better weather allows us to put some of the tubes on the road. We also have counters that are not required tubes, but we like to try to get all four in the same direction.
Mm-hmm. And is this being done as to give a baseline for when changes occur at Agnes Irwin, or is it?
We're doing it at this point just to have some general information. We try to keep the counts on our roads fairly up to date.
Okay. Thanks.
But just to follow up to that, at this point in time, we think it's a mistake to change the timing of that light based on what was suggested by Agnes Irwin's traffic engineer. So that's the reason we're looking to get this base count.
And as I understand it, the changes that they're making should not increase traffic at all. There are no new students coming.
That is correct.
Right?
That's correct.
Did we approve it?
A motion to approve?
Second.
I already did.
No, you did. I hear you. Okay, all in favor?
Aye.
The next item is the announcement of a vacancy on the Civil Service Commission. I want to acknowledge and thank Peter Gibbons-Neff for his many years of service on the Civil Service Commission. It's a very, very important position because the Civil Service Commission establishes lists of candidates who are eligible for various positions in the police department. So it involves a lot of work, a lot of analysis of personnel, and we want to thank Peter for that. As a result of Peter going off the board, we do have a vacancy, and anybody who has an interest in that should send their resume and/or letter of interest to Bill Martin here at the Township. We already did the ceasefire PA presentation, and there's one other item on the agenda, not on the agenda, I should say. It was reported in the newspaper last week that John Ruddy, our...
Do we have to do?
What?
Are we going to address the police and what's going on with them here, or is it necessary that we do that?
We're going to make the appointment. You
Yeah,
will do that
yeah.
too? Okay.
All right.
So, as it was reported in the paper, John Ruddy, our superintendent of police, who's been in the township here for a period of 30 years and has truly distinguished himself in every level of the department, he is moving on to retirement. We wish John well in a well-deserved retirement, but we have to be concerned about moving forward. So we're starting the process of trying to identify who will be the next individual to lead the police department. And in the interim, I believe Bill Martin has a recommendation for us for an officer in charge to handle things in the interim until we appoint the new police chief. Bill?
Yeah, it would be my recommendation that you appoint Lieutenant A.J. Antonini as the officer in charge during the interim, serving as the officer in charge during your search for a permanent full-time police chief.
I'll move to approve the recommendation.
Second.
I would note that A.J. has been 18 years? 20?
23 years, sir.
23 years. And again, has distinguished himself at all levels in the police department. We spoke with A.J. earlier and advised him that he would be considering it this evening, and would he accept the position in the interim basis if offered, understanding, of course, that we are going to be looking for a permanent chief, and there may be other candidates as well. In fact, AJ, you may decide after a couple of months you don't want to apply yourself. But we'll see how it goes. We're very fortunate to have somebody with AJ's experience, and we understand that there are several sergeants who assist AJ presently with a lot of administrative and operational duties, and we would expect you to continue on with that, all right?
And AJ, we appreciate you taking the positions. We know we're down a couple lieutenants, and now we're down the third lieutenant because you're taking this position. So the board here is to support you, and the community's here to support you, and we want you to do a great job. We know you will.
Thank you all for your vote of confidence. If I can, I'd just like to read something. I know Superintendent Ruddy would not want me to do this, but I think he deserves it after 30 years. Under Superintendent Ruddy's leadership, the Radnor Police Department has become what I believe the premier municipal law enforcement agency in Pennsylvania. To accomplish this, he has stressed public service, professionalism, and a fair approach. Quite frankly, in order to list his accomplishments for this department, it would take me much too long in this forum. As an officer, I was eager to serve under him in every capacity as we rose through the ranks. I learned quite a bit. As a township resident, I enjoyed the security and peace of mind of a well-trained and well-disciplined police department, in no small part due to his leadership. His friendship has become invaluable, and that will be sorely missed. I would like to add that even with Superintendent Ruddy leaving, because of the foundation he has laid, and because of the professionalism of our officers, the commissioners, the township residents, and all the other people who use our service can expect the same level of superb service in the future.
Thank you.
Thank you, AJ. Moved and seconded?
Did we vote?
Moved and seconded. All in favor?
Aye.
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 Thank you. Okay, Public Works and Engineering.
Yes, we have a resolution for 200 Ithan Creek. I guess this is for the sewer facilities planning module. It says that it conforms to applicable sewer-related zoning and other sewer-related municipal ordinance and plans, and to the comprehensive plan program of pollution control and quality management, and we're required to do this so he can apply for his sewer module. So I'll move the approval of this resolution.
Second.
Moved and second.
And this is basically an amendment to the Act 537 plan?
That's correct. That's for this land development application.
Okay, thank you.
The mods are available, and there's no issues with that, Dan?
That's correct. There's no issues on our end, but this will allow him to pursue further downstream.
Okay, thank you. Moved and seconded. Any other discussion? Any public discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. I'd like to move authorization to go out for bid for landscape mulch and turf products, seed and fertilizer, and I so move.
Can I ask a question, Bill?
Sure.
I don't remember if this is the item, but
Yes.
last year we went out for bid for, I think it was turf and seed, and then we delinked the two. I don't know if my recollection is accurate or inaccurate. I don't remember specifically, but the way this is worded, I don't know if if it's the same one, but it appears as if we're going to get a single bid for seed and fertilizer.
Now, the bids are able to be split.
Okay.
We do allow to split the bid. The mulch will be a separate bid itself, based on a 400 to 500 yard usage, and that will change according to, what we find in the beds as we go out there.
But what about the seed and fertilizer? Are we getting a single bid for seed and fertilizer? Or are we getting a bid for seed and a bid for fertilizer?
Different companies some companies will bid both products. Some people will just bid fertilizer. Some will just bid seed. So it'll be mixed, and we will have a choice to make out of the bid submissions.
Okay, thanks.
Moved and seconded. Any further discussion? Public comment? All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Also, I'd like to move the approval to buy a deep tine aerifier. It is under the state contract. The price is $22,353, and it's in the 210 capital budget, and I would move the approval.
Second.
Question, Bill. We used to do deep tine years ago, right?
Yes. What we used to do in-house was actually core aeration.
Right.
And The next thing that you'll be that I'm looking to get you approved is the slit seed spreader. We also used to broadcast our seed, which is basically putting it in a hopper and basically throwing it around.
Right.
With the core aeration we used to do, there's like a two-step process. You have to go through, you do the core aeration, you spread the seed, and then you have to take a drag mat out to the field and actually run back and forth in order to introduce the seed into the soil. So this deep tine aeration, there's many benefits, and I think anybody that was on the Give Grass a Chance committee knows some of the deep tine aeration. Most of your core aeration goes 3 to 4 inches, where your deep tine can go anywhere 8, 10, 12. And what happens there is not only do you take a lot of the compaction out of the athletic fields, and we have 23 athletic fields that we're going to be working on this year. And just to give you an example, when we used to do deep tine aeration, we used to contract it out, and it would be anywhere from $2,000 to $3,000 per field, depending on the square footage in the field. I think this is a great purchase. It enables us to, I think, make great improvements to our athletic fields. Being able to get a deeper root system, better watering. The deeper holes will hold on to the fertilizer a lot longer. So I think it's crucial to get the most out of the products that we're putting down, and this will certainly help do that.
And are we still top dressing?
We have not top dressed in a while, and some of that has to do with the operational budgets. If we'd like to pick out 1 or 2 fields each year. And Paul Totero does an excellent job in going through the athletic fields. Like I said, there's 23 athletic fields that we're looking to address this year. He goes out, takes soil samples, we find out what nitrogen, what components need to be put back in that field, what the compaction rates are. Not every field will get the same application.
Mm-hmm.
Things will change.
Thank you.
I would just like to add, I attended 1 or 2 of those Give Grass a Chance meetings and had the benefit of hearing from the experts that we had come in from Penn State, I believe it was. And if there was one thing that we all left with, it was the impression that it is imperative to do this deep tine aeration to keep these fields that we have invested so much money in, especially at the middle school, to keep them healthy and safe for use. So I really support this purchase.
Any other comments? Any public comment?
More of like a question. Is there any economies through the Radnor School District? Do they, with the fields as far as the equipment being used? So we do all the fields for them? Just a question. Thank you.
Moved up. Christina, you want to speak about this issue?
Thank you. Hi, Christina Peroni. I was wondering, did we ever get our agreement with the school district, because the approval for the $250,000 for the turf was contingent on getting approval for a long-term deal for maintenance. Did we ever get that?
I'm not aware that we did, but that's not really the issue we're talking about right now.
But isn't that all related to the turf? Like, did we ever get the money for the maintenance that we needed to maintain the turf?
That was for the turf fields, right?
Right.
Yeah, we're talking about the regular fields.
But the 250.
No, I understand your
yeah.
question, but if you don't mind, would you bring it back in public comment?
Okay.
Well, we might as well knock it out now and have her come back.
We don't know.
I know, well then tell her we don't know.
I think we have an existing agreement that expires, correct?
No,
Are we
this
talking
is
about
different.
the school field maintenance agreement or the specific to the middle school field?
I'm talking about the middle school field.
Okay.
When the field was approved,
Okay, I apologize.
yeah,
When the middle school was approved, then you can tell me during the other comment.
great, thank you. Motion made and seconded, all in favor? Aye.
Aye.
The next one, I'd like to move the approval that we purchase a slit seed spreader. It's under the state contract. The price is $13,200, and it's in our 2010 capital budget. And I move the approval.
Any commissioner comment or discussion? Any public comment or discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
That's it under Public Works.
Okay, any old business?
Yeah, I have something I'd like to bring up. As everyone knows, in about a week, we're changing over our trash service, and there's some pretty significant changes. Residents will now be putting their trash out by the curb unless they pay a $350 fee. And it's come to a lot of our attention that there is a small population in Radnor who cannot afford to pay a $350 fee. However, they are unable, incapable, elderly or frail, and cannot bring their trash out. And we've been having some discussions and thoughts about how we can address this and how we can address this small but important population that we need to service. And I'd like to make a proposal for discussion and get some feedback from this group and the public on whether this might work. I would propose that we set up a grant program, and not to be administered by this township or by the commissioners, but to be administered by the Wayne Senior Center. I've had discussions with them, and they're willing to take this on, subject to approval by their board, and they don't have a board meeting, haven't had one yet, but that they would take the names, and they would do a vetting process, have some sort of affidavit of inability and income verification. The income levels we could use would be, could parallel the ones used in other townships for this purpose, and also mirror the PACE, the state pharmaceutical assistance for the elderly levels, which I believe right now are about $23,000 for a single annual income, and about $31,500 or $32,000 for a couple. So a senior who could not afford and wasn't capable of taking their trash out would call the senior center and submit these forms, and if they were approved, then they would be given a grant to have the fee waived, or we haven't worked out the funding yet.
Yeah, I was going to say, can I ask a terminology? Are we waiving the fee, or is the senior center giving me a grant to pay the fee?
Well, that will depend really on whether we get funding to fund a grant program. And I also think it would be beneficial for us to know what this pool of applicants are. You know, if it's 2 or 3 people, do we really need to go out and get a grant for that? If it's 20 to 30 people, yes, we will go out and get grant money for that. But we don't actually need to know that right away. We can start to assemble this list, and so people this week could send their names to the Wayne Senior Center without having that formally in place yet, so that we could start to get an idea of what this pool of people is.
I have 2 questions.
Sure.
What do we do next Monday if you have somebody on that list who would qualify? Are you going to pick it up if we got it to them, get you the names built for a week or 2, or what's?
I'd need direction from the board. I mean, we're ready to go with the list. It's a week, and and we also have the issue of, let's say, someone's already paid and they might qualify. We're going to refund their money, or there's a number of issues that you need to consider.
Did somebody actually pay and claim they couldn't afford it?
Well, we don't know. I mean, people have paid, but they may qualify. I don't know.
Someone, I was approached that way, so I
So
can
they
say,
paid the fee
I can say
instead of-
absolutely that
okay,
somebody
that's-
that I believe would meet the guidelines.
Right. Well, I think,
I've had 2 people say this is 2 so far.
I would suggest that we take those names, and starting next week, we service them as if they've qualified, and if we find later they don't qualify, then we ask them for the fee.
I think that's a very reasonable proposal.
Bill?
Yeah, as long as the list gets to me, I mean, it's a board directive. I mean, I have no problem incorporating them onto the runs until we come up with a system or a scholarship, whatever it may be. We certainly can pick them up. One thing I want to bring to the board's attention is, depending on how many scholarships you give out, it's going to make a difference in personnel, too. Once you start to get up into numbers, where you're incorporating 50 or 60, 65 homes on a run, it's going to change the times that you're finishing collection. So I just want the board to be aware of that. I have no problem incorporating them in the runs. I just want to, we're talking about cutting personnel and stuff like that, and that's going to be an issue depending on how many participants we get.
Bill, the way what I've heard and discussed is that it would be transparent to you at the garage, basically, because you'll just get a name and an address. So for your assumption, so if there was 30 people before this happened and 50 afterwards, that's the totals that we had talked about
Bill's
using.
concerned that if it gets to a certain limit, his staff is budgeted to
Right.
service. So
Right,
if we
and
if
that's-
we cross a threshold, you would need an
And I
extra
believe
person.
to date, we have about 145 to 105 or 150 paying customers. I have that list. I've been trying to separate that list, and get it associated with the maps that I have for the different routes on the trucks. So it's just imperative that if there's somebody that needs the service, if there's somebody that needs the exemption, the temporary exemption, that I get that information so it's incorporated on the list, and we try and cut back on some of the phone calls.
Bill, are you going to freeze the list for a while, or if somebody decides after, here we are February, somebody decides they're going to try to bring it out for the first 2 months themselves, and then they decide it's too much work for them? Are you going to, how are we implementing?
Price schedule.
Prorated.
Well, we discussed that.
I just want to make sure it's understood.
You can't, we discussed this today, and you can't have someone, call up Friday and say, put me on Monday. Depending on, we'll have a window after the February 1st deadline, but if you come in after that, you'll pay for the next available quarter.
So essentially, we'll make the change once a quarter going
Yes.
forward. Okay.
You have an opportunity, and it gets prorated, but, and what quarter you sign up.
And I mean, let's be clear. I mean, we don't have a lot of people that have requested that said they can't afford.
I've had
I
one.
mean, I don't have anyone in my ward, so.
Yeah, I've
you know,
only
we're
had
not-
one.
We're
I've had
talking
one.
about 1 or 2 people. We're not talking,
Elaine,
so
just on process, should these people contact Susan at the senior center? Is
Yes,
that, okay.
Wayne Senior Center, they have a website you can get on, or you can just look it up.
Some
in
of
the
these
book.
people may not, since
They
they're
don't even know
older,
what-
they may
Right,
not.
you
so-
can, they're in the phone book.
So contact
Under
Susan
Wayne.
Shapiro?
Susan Shapiro is the director, but whoever answers the phone, you can tell them why you're calling. And they're assembling the names now. And as we get this more defined, there'll be a form to fill out. There's not a form to fill out yet, but there will be a form to fill out. But for now, if you can't take out your trash and you feel that you probably qualify under those income levels, call the Wayne Senior Center and get on the list for next week.
What was the,
what do you use as income? I mean, do you use
It's
pension,
the
social
PACE.
security, everything?
Oh,
We looked at, not to interrupt, we looked at Lower Merion Township, and they used the PACE numbers. I sent, their affidavits, it's pretty straightforward. You're attesting that you're a senior citizen and qualify under those numbers. You sign it. I'm not sure if you even have to get it notarized, and then I would recommend using that form for this year, and we can adjust it to we need to later. But it's pretty straightforward.
does PACE include all income, or is it just earned income?
That I'm not sure.
Well, most of the seniors don't have earned income. I mean, they have pensions and dividends and stocks, and they have all kinds of things. I mean, you could have no income and make $80,000 or $200,000 a
Right,
year.
and that's what I just need to understand that part of it, so I can.
I don't know, yeah, all right. Yes, Bill?
I would just ask that anybody on the board that has people right now that they know of, Kevin, I have the 2 that came through on the email. If you could just email those to me. I don't want somebody calling Ms. Shapiro and then it not getting back to me and having, tripping on the first week out there. So if any commissioners have names and addresses of participants that you'd like to have on that list now, please either email them to me in the next couple days. I'd appreciate it.
Are we going to address refunds, people who would qualify but have sent money in? And I know Lower Merion, use the Lower Merion form, they require you to pay first, right?
The only reason I brought that up, we have 150 people have subscribed. I don't know what the potential is. It could be 1 or 2 that have paid and now meet this qualification. We would just issue them a
All right,
refund.
So we can address that on an individual level, then, an individual basis.
But my opinion is if they qualify, they should get their money.
Yeah, if they qualify, they qualify. Any more old business?
I have 2 items. As some of the members of the board recall, the Garrett Hill Steering Committee concluded their recommendations to the board, and the board voted to approve the Garrett Hill zoning district zoning changes. And that committee was an ad hoc committee. So technically, ad hoc committees terminate their status when their task is completed. Their task was completed. There was a little bit of talk at that point of retasking that committee to be an implementation committee. We have, I think there's about 9 members that are still interested in being part of an implementation committee, at least 8 members that are expressing interest in being part of that committee. What I think would be appropriate is if the board sanction that group to be part of an implementation committee for Garrett Hill, And again, these are just volunteers that live there. They want to help. They want to improve the business district. They've already taken some steps on their own, as independents to form an enhancement trust. And they'll be seeking donations from, from individuals and businesses to try to collect money. What I'd like to do is on the next meeting, if this board's interested in this, and I think we should, is appoint members of this Garrett Hill Steering Committee to the task of the Garrett Hill Implementation Committee, so the GHIC. And this is complementary to the existing Implementation Committee. We've spoken to members of that committee, and the more help everyone gets, the better off we are. There would probably be some cross-pollination between the committees and sharing of resources. But we do have a number of people here that are just waiting to work on this, and they're very eager to implement the master plan that we voted on back in the summer of 2008. And in that master plan, it said that the members of the steering committee would, in fact, do some of this type of implementation. So I don't know if we need to do it tonight necessarily, but maybe if we can get on the agenda for the next meeting. If anyone has any comments now, I'd like to know.
Rick, who dropped out?
Rick Yulo dropped out. He moved to.
Okay, but it wasn't. I can't remember the name. The lady who was speaking on behalf of her husband who tried to navigate. Okay.
Where'd Rick move to?
South Carolina.
Oh, you're kidding. There go the Scotch tastings.
Brevity.
Yeah, Rick Yulo moved to South Carolina, career change. And somewhat to my surprise, actually, but all the steering committee members, when I polled them, said they would be willing to continue to serve implementing the Garrett Hill Master Plan. And we actually had a meeting last month and assigned subcommittee roles to do that. But in fact, I think John is correct that some action needs to be taken on behalf of the board. Okay?
Thank you, Rick. And you said you had 2 items.
Oh, yeah. The other issue, the board back in November, December, had charged John Rice with the process of putting together an RFP to look into, investigate the approval process of the Township building. I just want to get an update from John Rice on that. Again, we're looking for an RFP here. We're not looking for an investigation necessarily from John Rice, but we need to know what direction to head in.
Yeah. What the board had directed I do is put together an RFP or some kind of a proposal for someone to do an audit of the costs. What I've been trying to do since then is to get some of that documentation together. John Granger had done some of that. I don't have an RFP available. I'm not real sure what this person would do at this point, other than to do what I'm trying to do, some of the groundwork and some of the legwork. The other thing, and I think the other thing that needs to be done, and I want to do that, is to interview the architect who was involved in this project. I've had some conversations with the staff, but most of the change orders and everything that happened on this building went through the architect. And I believe that he has most of the records. So I'm going to see what he has. And I will put that together to the board, and you can decide what you want to do with that. But that's what you had talked about. And I guess if you're looking at an RFP, you're looking at some kind of a forensic accounting firm or somebody to go down that path and go through an item-by-item documentation. I don't know what the cost would be, but I have some information. Christina Peroni sent me some information. John Granger had put together a list of some of the costs and the categories, but I think the person that probably has most of the information is the architect. So that's my next step, and then I'll be back to this board with a recommendation.
John, just
You gotta wait for public comment.
Just to get from point A to point B, how much time and effort? What's going to cost us of your time and effort? I mean, we keep spending more and more money, and I think we have a significant concern that What are we ever going to get back, even though we know this information, and I think it's useful, but I just don't want to be spending an excessive amount of money.
Well, my time on this, Kevin's been sort of minimal, because I've been trying to understand who was doing what. You had a project manager, I've spoken to him, I've spoken to the staff that are still here, and there's a lack of documents that you would normally see on a project like this, that I have some of them, but from what I understand, from talking to everybody that's here that was involved in the purchase of the furniture and whatever else was done to fill this building, not just the bricks and the sticks and everything else, there's some other information I need to get from the architect. That's a meeting. In my opinion, that's a phone call and a meeting with him and a couple hours of my time, and then to give you what information I have, and to give you some suggestions and recommendations in terms of what you want to do next. What you want to do next is the next cost. I mean, that's a big cost. And that's a decision you're going to have to make in terms of how far down that path you want to go and what do you want to spend. But I don't, just in terms of legal fees, Kevin, it's been minimal on that topic. I know there's a lot of other costs on other topics that the township's incurring as you go along, but I've been trying to just gather information so I can understand and intelligently give you some kind of a recommendation on what you would be looking for. I don't
That's
want-
ideal. I mean, because I
Yeah.
think it's get the information, give us a recommendation as to how you think we should proceed, you know, what it would cost us to, A, get to the next step, and B, ultimately, if we do that, what's the likelihood of us ever getting anything back, and from whom?
The architect is the last party that I need to have a conversation with. And I plan to go see what they have that conversation, and then I'll be back to the board. I would say give me sometime, your second meeting in February. I'll shoot for that. I think that's gives me enough time to do that, and then to come back to the board and tell you what I found.
John, does that answer your question?
Yeah, that's great. Thank you, John. I appreciate that.
Thanks. Any other new business? Ms. Peroni has already reserved her spot for public participation.
I just have one brief item on new business. This is brief. There's been a lot of consternation and talk in our community about losing a grocery store in Wayne. I know I've heard it from many, many people, and everyone else on this board has. And I understand that the Acme it may at some point leave, and people are concerned about that, as am I. And I just wanted to propose that we have, as I understand it, there's a deed restriction on the property, and I'd like to see if we can direct staff or either Bill or John Rice to start a conversation with Acme, who holds the deed restriction. A deed restriction is not an outright prohibition. It's only enforceable by the person who holds it. To start a conversation with Acme and just start to explore whether that's going to be enforced and whether we could find a way to have it not enforced.
I'll respond to that way. I've already instructed Matt Bowman, our Community Development Director, to make contact with the property owner first. If we can sit down with a discussion with the property owner and Acme and this township and get some information about, what they're looking to do and if there's any way we can work with them. So that process has already begun underway. And we'll
That's
ask
great.
for board participation when we have that lined up.
Great, thank you.
There's one other item on the new business, the zoning hearing board decision on the B&B over in your ward, Hank, that we're going to be challenged, so we need to authorize our solicitor to participate.
I would so move.
Second.
Moved and seconded. Any public comment? All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Okay, new business.
No. Public participation.
I was trying to see if I could. Ness. Come on up, Christina.
I would like to follow up first on the whole issue of the field maintenance. So I understand our contract ended December of last year regarding the middle school. Do we know where that stands?
I'm sorry, Christine, I was
Field maintenance, wondering where that
Well, this
agreement.
year is the year that the field maintenance contract with the school district is up for
December of last year,
renegotiation. Yeah.
right?
So
It automatically renews itself, and it's in the process of being negotiated.
So what's the termination provisions if it automatically renews itself?
I don't have that in front of me.
Yeah, it was notified 30 or 60 days ahead or something. I remember.
Did the school district pass?
We've been in, the previous administration and the finance director and myself have been in constant contact with the school district on this issue for a number of months. Further provisions, I'd have to look at it, but it expires at the end of December 31st, 2009 with an automatic 1-year renewal unless both parties disagree. I thought John Rice could give you the language on it, but it's still being negotiated. We've been.
Yeah, but they haven't paid us for last year,
No, we
right?
haven't had a lot of
alternatives do we have, John
cooperation.
Rice?
They paid us $60,000.
Can I make a recommendation? Because I didn't know Tom Blogsman was involved in this. There's 2 or 3 different people that are talking to 2 or 3 different people at the school district, and it landed on my desk in the last 2 or 3 weeks, the agreement for the first time. And I know there's an issue with payment, but I think the board needs to appoint 1 or 2 or 3 of you to participate in some kind of a meeting in terms of the extension and in terms of any money that might be due on either side of it. I'm not that familiar with it. I think there is an automatic extension, but it expired in December of '08. I got as far as making a call to Mr. Pupio in the last week or so. That was one of a couple of things I wanted to talk to him about. So I don't know who all's involved on the school district side. I know Karen's been talking to their business manager. I was about to start to talk to their solicitor, but I think someone needs to, one of you 7 or more need to decide who's going to head that meeting. I was going to ask to meet with him, but I think it's also important for one of you and someone from the school district side to get together and hash this out.
Well, I already have a meeting scheduled with the president of the school board, and that's one of the topics I have on my list to discuss with him, and that's going to be this week.
And you're going to be versed on all the issues?
I know those issues well.
Because I don't want to set up some separate meeting and
Right.
and have a couple different.
And as we move forward, we probably should use the Parks and Rec Committee.
One of the things when the Board of Commissioners was voting to spend $250,000 was that we were sure that they would be paying for maintenance, and that maintenance on the old turf field, which had never been completely ratified, would be taken care of as well. And I remember President Mahoney at the time made sure that that was one of the issues that was being addressed. So maybe President Nagel, when you're doing that, you can look at the old approvals and the language, because it was very, very specific, the language.
Yeah, I was in the meeting, I remember.
Right, so if you can make sure that that language is being enforced as far as what the township is paying for, because it was very specific.
Yeah, there's one other thing, and I just don't mean to interrupt you, but when you speak with them, one of the things that we talked about when we approved the money for the second turf field, which is on the football field, was to set up a committee which would track its use, to try and keep on top of the environmental information about the use of such fields, because the debate that we had about it went kind of back and forth on whether or not it was safe or wasn't it safe. And I'd like to see that committee gets put into place. I mean, that's something that just kind of fell through the cracks, and other things happen with this township, as everybody knows, but I think we really should get back onto that. So if you could raise that, John, I'd really appreciate it. Thank you.
I think that's a great suggestion. I know the Delaware Riverkeeper Network, for which I'm a board member, had participated and also dedicated some of her time to getting some of the information about the safety for the children.
Yeah,
so
and
maybe
the EAC had looked at it, and I think Board of Health looked at it too, if I remember correctly.
So it would be great if we get some ad hoc committee that could look at it who are experts in that field. So I think that would be terrific. My second issue has to do with what Commissioner Fisher raised, which was having to do with putting out an RFP. And as I recall, it was November or so when the board at the time, which has some different members now, voted unanimously for transparency and for doing an RFP so that we would find out exactly what happened with this township building. For those who don't know, at the time, there were only 2 approvals. I know this because I attended every single township meeting. There was one approval for the actual furniture, and there was another approval for the building. And those were the only 2 approvals that went through any public debate or conversation. Everything else that happened was behind closed doors.
No, I was here when not here, it was in the old building, when we discussed the telecommunications.
And that was
the
part of
computer.
furniture. That was part of furniture and telecommunications.
And that was about 1 point, I was
That was when you were
1.8
running.
million, something like that?
Correct.
Big number.
That was the only addendum to the cost of the building that was raised in public.
Well, you have a $16 million figure? Is that the figure you use?
I have a figure that I got from
No.
Amy
What's the figure you
Cuthbertson.
use?
Well, that's what
16 million.
That's
Yeah.
what she gave me as how much money had actually been spent.
Well, $1.2 million of that was renting the space over there, moving back here, $1.2 million. That was
But
documented.
that's all part of.
No, but that also was
Actually,
documented and approved.
I have the document in front of me. It's
Yeah. No, I understand that.
562,000 for temporary office rents.
Now, how about moving expense?
Well,
Just read them down, John. It's $1.2 million.
okay, moving 334,000.
What's the next one?
Office rents 562.
Oh, well, all I'm
So there's
saying is,
800.
you talk about $60 million for the new building, you ought to subtract $1.2 million that is documented, it was all approved, the rental was all done at public meetings, the rental over there, the moving expense, we approved all those expenditures. So from 16, now we're down to 14 something, or 15. you know?
I know in public, $1.6 million was approved, and there was another number approved, $1.6 million or so for, or $1.2 million approved for AV and furniture. My point is, I'm not the determining factor. I know the documents I've received, I know that the 2 numbers don't match, and I know that Amy knows, the prior finance
Amy
director.
who?
Amy Cuthbertson.
Well, that doesn't
gave
do us
me
any good, her
documents
knowing.
under a right-to-know request as to how much the township had spent, and it wasn't consistent with those 2 approvals. So my point is, I'm not the determining factor, but the public monies was used, and the feeling that, and I recognize that there's some new board members, and I know that these board members believe in transparency and believe in open government, and I am thrilled that the new board members are here with those beliefs. And so what I'm hoping for is that we don't get pushed back as we have. I mean, I wrote a note to Mr. Rice on January 8th, following up because Mr. Masterson said, get in touch with Mr. Rice and let him know what documents you have so that we have consistency. Again, it's not my job to be in charge of all the documents of the township. I do have a lot of them, but that's not my responsibility. An independent person should be investigating. And so my point is, let's not keep pushing this back. It's been pushed back now 3 full months. And I would hope that the new members of the board truly believe in transparency. And there are 2 issues here. One is, what can we get back? And then the other is, were we violated? And the first question of were we violated has to do with, and someone gave me this brilliant analogy, which is if somebody breaks into your home and takes a gift that you got from your grandmother, and they ripped through your stuff and took this silly little thing you got from your grandmother that was really valuable to you, but yet has no value, did the person who broke into your home not do something wrong? Well, yeah, they did. And so somebody broke into our home. This is our township's home. And whether or not we can recover the money, if something was done that's criminal, it's your fiduciary responsibility to investigate.
Christina, if I may.
Yep.
There's 2 really, in my mind, 2 separate issues. One is, were there criminal acts?
Right.
And we will prosecute that to the furthest
Great.
extent of the law.
No, we will not.
We'll turn it over to the
Okay,
authorities,
all right,
and they will prosecute.
Don't say we'll
it. Okay.
prosecute, because we have no authority
No,
to
I'm,
prosecute.
what I was trying to indicate, Bill, is that we're not just going to blow it off. Secondly, then there's the other issues about were things approved properly, did anybody make money off of, those
Right,
kind of things.
right.
And that's what I think John is alluding to is, let's find out about the change orders, let's find out about the process. And as Kevin mentioned, that we're going to make a business decision on.
Yeah.
And the business decision of spending $15,000 or $20,000 to get an independent firm, I think is a no-brainer. It is your responsibility and fiduciary responsibility to spend that kind of
I don't
money.
disagree if it's that kind of money, but
Yeah,
the legal fees.
You know what, I'm not talking about the legal fees. If you remember Margolis, their report was minimal. And their report was $15,000.
That's because John Fisher did all the work for them.
Well, John Fisher did do a lot of work, but whatever it may be, that was a minimal amount of money. And we just need to know, and we can't let this go, because I know it's dirty and yucky, but we need to make sure that our house is clean, and that anybody who violate us...
For the biggest reason of all, we need to reestablish faith in government.
Correct. So I'm
So-
delighted to hear that Mr. Rice is going to come back with something, and hopefully an RFP written as was requested and as was voted on in the November meeting. So I'm delighted to hear that, and I look forward to coming back in mid-February to hear that.
Well, he might come back with a recommendation that we not do it because he couldn't find anything.
But I think it's practically impossible to find something when there's not money documented that you're allowed to spend this kind of money, then it's impossible. I have those documents. So if I have those documents, then anybody else could have those
Christina,
documents.
what I'm going to be looking for, regardless of what this board's decision is, I'll be looking for any and all documents pertaining to the approval of the expenses on the township building. And I want to be able to see in my own eyes, were these expenses voted on by the board? If they were not, that gives me probable cause to go to the FBI or anyone else I want to go to. And we're not the prosecutors.
Right.
But we do have a responsibility, fiduciary responsibility, to know what happened as a board, to know what happened. And whether we want to spend more money to pay someone else to tell us what happened, at the end of the day, I just want to see the documents. I want to see the bills we paid, and I want to see the votes that were taken. And if there's a mismatch, that's enough for me to do what I need to do. And whether we spend another $30,000 by hiring an outside firm to do this, to me, it's a moot point. I want to see the documents, and that's what I'm hoping John Rice will be putting together for us, because he'll have to demonstrate to us where we have to go. At the end of the day, if there's nothing there, I'll be very happy to see that. I'll be very happy that there's no scandal, that there's no misappropriation of public funds. But if I see documents that are lacking approvals for the expenses, I'm going to have a real problem with that. And I will not worry about what this board decides to do. I will simply pick up the phone and call the FBI. It's that simple.
Mr. Fisher, I think the township folks and all the citizens I talk to are just very grateful for the time and energy you've spent looking out for their interests. And I know a lot of other people have as well. And I'm grateful. As a citizen and taxpayer, I really appreciate your time and effort. And I know the other members of this board will support your efforts because it's the right thing to do.
Hey, Karen and Bill,
Thank you.
I got a question for you, and it's just a suggestion, and you can sway Christina, because I can see if it has any merits. Based on the information you have available to you guys now, do you think you could get like an intern from Villanova or somebody to come in? You're smiling. I don't know if that's a smiling or laughing.
Well, we've been working on getting an intern just to help the finance department, but.
Okay.
Yeah, I get an intern for the summer. That's what I'm getting back. They can't get anybody before that. I have pulled a lot of the documents internally that I can find. What I was just telling Bill is it was not kept well. It was not all in one place. But I do have a lot of the information that I've pulled together and tried to sort through Excel to try to identify what it is we have and what might be missing. I'd like to see what you have, because maybe that will fill in some gaps or tell me where to look next.
Well, I think if you pull out Amy
excuse
Cuthbertson,
me.
sure, sorry.
Excuse me. I think your point, Kevin, is well taken, that if we could do some of this homework internally and save some money by doing that, we're that far ahead of the game. I don't know that everything still exists in the township. And that's,
Christine's not asking an unreasonable question. It's like,
She's not.
this was authorized, this was spent,
Yep.
what's the difference and how did we get there? My concern is, it's information that's important to know, but I don't want to spend $100,000, $200,000
Right.
to get there. If I
and I
spend
can tell you,
$15,000, I'm okay with that.
a forensic audit for this is going to be a minimum of $30,000.
I think if you talk to the Margolis organization, I think if you talk to them, they spent $15,000 and uncovered what turned out to be like $1 million worth of crimes.
Christine, that's a different type of forensic audit. That's the reason I'm saying that.
Okay, but there were only, the easy part of this, just to put it out there in the public, is that there were 2 conversations. I know this because I came to a lot of very quiet meetings where I would say, what's going on with the township building? And I would hear on schedule, on time, on budget, on schedule, on time. But yet when I asked for the budget to actual, I was refused those documents. So now that we know what that means when you're refused documents like budget to actual, or I was told they don't exist. So, you know, all of our alarm bells should go off. And why? Because we need to know if we were violated. We need to know if there are other people among us who have done things wrong. So we all agree.
Only because of the lateness of the hour.
Yeah,
I think we
good.
all agree.
Okay, so as long as we
Yeah.
just have action,
Yes.
you will silence me.
Don't
Thank
want to
you.
do that. And I don't think we can, but okay. Patrick will tell us.
Jim Sneller came in, spoke once and left.
Wow.
Good evening again. Dan Sherry, 3 Donna Lane, and I apologize if this has been answered, but I came late to the meeting. The power on my street is for some reason out. But when I saw tonight's proposed resolution for what has been called CBFAC and CBAC, that's the Citizens Budget and Finance Advisory Committee, I got very interested. And then I heard a commissioner, I'm not sure which one, state that the 7 spots have been filled. Is that accurate?
Appointed.
They've been appointed. Okay. What are the names of those individuals?
Bill's got them over there.
There's a Nicholas Kemp who lives in Ravenscliff.
I think they were.
Chris Watson. Here you go.
I could read them if you'd like.
Wilson?
Yes.
Sarah Armstrong.
They were all appointed at a public meeting.
They were?
H. Robert
Yes,
Boring.
yes.
Boehringer.
They were interviewed, applications were requested from the public, they were interviewed, and they were appointed at a public meeting.
I'm glad to hear that. If I could just hear the names. I only can make out Sarah
Didn't we
Armstrong.
appoint everybody who applied?
Yes, we did.
Okay. So we have Sarah Armstrong and the other 6?
Do you want me to?
Let me just get Dan a copy of the list. It's late. I don't feel like reading these.
We'll give you a copy of the list.
You give me a copy of the list. Okay. I don't know how long it would take to read 6 names.
There were
but-
two of them at the meeting. There's a gentleman right
Here,
there.
and there had been somebody back there.
Chaka was back there.
Right.
Yep, we got a good group.
I could run them real quick. Robert Boehringer, Nicholas Kemp, Robert Murdaca, Christopher Watson, Dr. Craig Wheeland, Philip Wilson, and Sarah Armstrong.
Okay, okay. All right, now that I have that list. Did I also hear tonight that with respect to this ordinance, it's going to include a provision that 2 additional people can be put on this board at the discretion of this particular Board of Commissioners?
Yep.
Just like the original 7 were.
Okay, what is the philosophy behind that, if I may ask?
Excuse me a moment. I don't think that
Yeah.
that's the right answer, though, because all that would happen is that there was a discussion that was put out, and then that'll come back at the
And
next.
the resolution
and then
hasn't
we'll
been
vote for it.
passed
So-
yet.
Yeah, we didn't
so
vote
I-
on it yet.
I think the answer to the question is the board hasn't decided that, but it was I'm sorry if I'm interrupting you.
That's all right. It's all right.
That was part of the discussion, but there was no determination that the size of the board would increase.
And the
Oh, I understand there wasn't a determination. My question was, what was the philosophy behind that? And I apologize,
philosophy-
I honestly do not know which commissioner put that forward, but when you set up a 7-person board and you task them with their number of duties, but you reserve the right to appoint an additional 2 people to that board, it seems that there could be a majority decision that, based on your discretion,
reason,
could
Dan-
change from a
Excuse me,
4 to 3
Mr. Sherry.
decision
Mr.
to
Sherry,
a
would you
5
let
to 4
somebody
decision.
answer your question?
Okay, was it you, Commissioner?
It
Nagel,
doesn't
put that
matter.
forward?
Here's the deal. It was said that we had people, for example, Christina Peroni, who had put her name in for consideration. And since we did not have,
No, she withdrew.
she withdrew because, and I know because it was a personal discussion with me, because we didn't have the charge. Now, once we get the charge developed, Christina may want to come back on that board. And she'd be a great person to be on that board.
The resolution next week is going to have the number 9 in there for us to consider.
It's going to have the number 9 in there.
Yes.
Okay, well, that's interesting.
Up to 9.
It's going to have the number 9 in there.
I think to Dan's point,
Well, we have to have a
you
minimum
need to
there.
set the numbers so that they can understand what a quorum is and what,
Well, and not just that, but again, I think you run the risk of mischief if you're able to change the dynamic of the board. And by board, I mean the Citizens Budget and Finance Advisory Committee. It's not actually board.
Well, I
it's a
would think
committee.
if we decide to go to 9, we would ask for applicants and do it right away. We wouldn't hold off to see if they vote the way we want.
Well, That's good of you to say, Commissioner.
They're
Spindler.
advisory
Well, based on our discussion tonight about that
an
committee,
advisory board.
nobody knows what we want, so
Indeed, and that's fascinating, Commissioner Higgins, that you bring this up, because you had 7 people who accepted these particular slots without actually knowing what it is they're doing. I find that curious, for
We
lack
met
of a
with
better
them, and
word.
we told them we'd be discussing, and we would come up with a charge, but we want them to look into the finances of the township. That's what it's all about.
That's what it's all about. Okay, well, I'm glad to hear that that's what it's all about. That's just strange to me that people would volunteer that without having any idea what it is they're actually doing or what they're charged with, but
They have
I'll move on.
confidence in the Board of Commissioners.
Okay. Well, it's good to have confidence.
Since you have the names, you could also ask them.
Oh, I know. I can now do that. Another question that I have, and this goes back a couple of years, so pardon my ignorance, but as I understand it, back in 2006, a public referendum passed with respect to a $20 million limit that this board could potentially go out and get for the preservation of open space and other forms of property. And I'll read from this public referendum, which I believe passed with 80% voter approval. It says, quote, shall debt of up to $20 million to finance the acquisition and preservation of real property, interests therein, and contracts related to real property, all for purposes of open space preservation, recreation, and environmental and historic preservation, be authorized to be incurred as debt approved by the electors. That's the end quote. And I believe that passed in 2006. It was pushed in this township by a group called the Citizens to Preserve Radnor. Very, very neat acronym, CPR. There were a number of people involved in that group, including Commissioner Nagel and Commissioner Schaefer. I'm curious, since that referendum passed, this is a two-part question. Number one, does this board thereafter have to vote to actually authorize the going out and getting of the $20 million bond? And if so, has that actually happened yet?
We do have to vote, and it hasn't happened.
You do have to vote, and it has not happened. Okay. Well, that's what I thought. And that's why a couple of weeks ago, this story that ran in the mainline Suburban Life troubled me more than a little bit. The name of this particular story is called A Mansion on the Market. It was written by mainline Suburban Life reporter Sam Strike. And I'll just put it down on this table here just so the camera can capture it.
This is not a prosecution.
Is it on yet? Okay, maybe we can zoom in here.
Dan, excuse me, you're out of order.
How so?
Because you are wandering off trying to start some issue without just come to the point.
Okay, well this is
What
relevant.
is your
Commissioner
point?
Nagel, and I think I
Excuse me,
penciled it.
Mr. Sherry, what is your point?
I'll explain it to you, Commissioner Nagel.
That's all anybody wants to hear.
This particular news story speaks about a real estate parcel that has come on the active real estate market. It came back on the market about November of 2009, and it's called the Poplar House. The Poplar House is a 36-acre land tract in Wayne. It's specifically between Maplewood Avenue and Brook Road. And in addition, there's a 10-bedroom, 11-fireplace house. Now, this particular property is on the
Dan,
active market.
what
for
is your
13
issue?
No, Commissioner Nagel.
No,
you're just giving-
what is your issue?
May I continue with my
No,
question?
you may not. Not if you don't answer my question. What is your specific issue?
Oh, it goes to the $20 million bond, Commissioner.
Fine.
Nagel, also
What is your issue?
Well, with respect to this particular land parcel, in this particular story, Commissioner-elect Schaefer was interviewed. And this is what Commissioner Schaefer said with respect to this particular property. She said that the best case scenario would be for a conservation buyer to purchase the property. And thereafter, Commissioner Schaefer says this. She says that she does not see a, quote, realistic chance, end quote, of spending a lot of public money to preserve the property, we're talking about Poplar House, for one, because the larger parcel Ardrazen is on the market, and township officials have stated for years that they want to preserve some of that estate, end quote.
When was
So
that,
now I
when
see
was that
tonight-
article, Mr. Sherry?
This was written On December 2nd, 2009.
So Ms. Schaefer was not a commissioner at that time.
I believe I clarified her as Commissioner-elect Schaefer, Mr. Naaman. Okay.
Excuse me.
As I was stating.
What is your point? You haven't
Tonight,
made a point yet.
Well, here's my point. I heard from Commissioner Spengler tonight that the vote to authorize the $20 million bond has not yet gone forward.
That's absolutely correct.
So as a result, why would a commissioner-elect tell the newspaper that this board is not interested in other real estate parcels aside from Ardrossan?
She did not speak for the board.
She did not speak for the board. Well, it's interesting because this dovetails with open space, and tonight we learned on the standing committee chairs and members that the chair of open space is Elaine Paul Schaefer. So you asked why I was bringing this up, and now I believe I've dovetailed it in. My question is now, has this board evaluated Poplar House? Has it approached the seller of Poplar House? And if not, why not?
Well, it's in my ward. I went and looked at it with another commissioner and evaluated. It's, you know, I've known for years. I've known Mrs. Thurman since 1962, and I knew her property was going to be sold. And the fact of the matter is, it has a big building on there, has a lot of steep slopes, and it doesn't have, in my mind, my personal mind, any value to the township for me to spend that money, because that money, that $20 million, I went around and told everyone in my ward, and I'm trying to buy as much land at Ardrossan with that money if we can. So when I looked at this property and compared it to that, I agree exactly what Elaine Schaefer said.
Well,
Can I just add that we
clarification.
have an open space plan that was adopted in 1991. Ardrossan is in that plan. The Thurman tract is not. So, you know, and my opinion as to what may happen with that that particular property is my opinion. I'm not Queen of Radnor.
Yeah, that's correct. But however, in the article, you were quoted as saying that there's not a realistic chance of spending a lot of public money to preserve Poplar House, for one, because the larger parcel, Ardrossan, is on the market, and township officials have stated for years that they want to preserve some of that estate. I don't see anything in here about you speaking about what your personal opinion is on it, Commissioner Schaefer, and you're certainly entitled to your particular position. However, I don't see where it is an effective negotiating strategy for commissioners and commissioners-elect to tell the press that we are interested in Ardrossan and Ardrossan only. How does that put you in a better bargaining position? If whoever owns Ardrossan is or becomes aware that there is another land tract that is potentially acquirable through the $20 million bond that you have yet to vote on, how is that disadvantageous to you? However, thanks to Commissioner Schaefer's comments, whoever owns that property, the Scotts or the trust that owns Ardrossan, now thinks that they're the only game in town. So while I'm encouraged that Commissioner Spengler and an unidentified commissioner went out and took a look at the property, I say again, has this board tasked anybody with looking at the Poplar House to do an evaluation between the Poplar House and Ardrossan? And if not, why not? It's still available for sale. It's $13.5 million.
If any commissioner thinks it's a valuable property, we should purchase it. We can call a meeting of the Open Space Committee. I decided it wasn't, so I didn't call a meeting of the Open Space Committee. Any other commissioner can do that and call a meeting of the Open Space Committee. They're asking $14 million for that property. It's a big house, which we can't use. It's just not the right property for us at this time.
Okay, I thought it was $13.5 million.
Well,
In fact, hold on, let me
13.5.
just check that one more time. Yep,
It really
13.5
doesn't
million.
matter, Dan.
It doesn't matter?
No.
Why not?
No, what I'm saying is 13.5 or 14 doesn't matter. There is a process. We have a land use committee.
Open Space Committee.
Open Space Committee. They will come back with recommendations to this board, and they need to get the approval of this board next. So.
Has this board already determined that this money is going to Ardrossan and Ardrossan alone?
No votes have ever been taken about that.
Indeed. And in fact, in the public referendum, there's no mention of Ardrossan. So I'm wondering, Commissioner Spengler, why were you telling members of your ward that this money was only going towards Ardrossan?
As far as I was concerned, that was my vote. That was my vote. I'm entitled to
John?
tell people my position on issues. That's
Mr.
my
Sherry.
position.
So you did vote?
Mr.
What? No,
Sherry,
it's my position on the issue.
Oh, it's your position on the issue.
That's
that you
right.
just go to Ardrossan and nothing but Ardrossan.
Mr. Sherry, public comment.
I mean, the individual commissioners are entitled to give their personal opinions. You can't paint that's a decision by the full board. I mean,
Did I do that?
Yes.
I thought I
Yeah.
asked very specifically whether or not this board had voted on this particular
And they
bond,
haven't.
whether they.
And they haven't. And if they had, you would know that. You would know that.
Well, perhaps you can clarify this for me, Solicitor Rice. Is this vote for whatever amount, $1 to $20 million?
What vote are you talking about?
To authorize the public referendum to actually go out to bond to get the $20 million. Is that required in an actual public meeting?
Of
course. We're the ones, the commissioners put it on the ballot. We put the issue on the ballot.
Put it on a ballot that has to be
We
voted
push it on the ballot.
That's again
and-
why I asked the question as to whether or not there actually had been a vote. Because when I hear
couldn't get on the
comments in the
ballot without a
press, when I
vote.
hear comments in the press such as, well, we can't consider the Poplar House because township officials have really, really invested themselves and are interested in Ardrossan, that makes very little sense to me, Commissioner Spengler, because
makes
this
great
board
sense to me.
could, if they
All
wanted
right,
to.
Dan,
they
you've
could
had your
vote-
say.
could they
Thank
vote-
you.
Could they vote and say,
That's
4-3?
it. You're done. I'll entertain a motion to adjourn. Is there any other public comment? No. All
Move we
right.
adjourn.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.